dense material. I want to just lay out before we start the presentation, introduce our presenters, that Jesse and I talked today, and our calendar is an issue here on how we respond. Yeah, right, exactly. So we will tonight have a presentation. We will, out of tonight's meeting, develop a framework to be adopted and discussed at our June meeting. And then that will be further fleshed out in a full letter to be adopted by the executive committee of the board in June. Because our July meeting is at the end of July and our response date is July 8th. So we have to do this in pieces. And we want to get, instead of waiting to a final letter, we want to get as much out in a broad framework. What is it? And we expect also, we worked last time with city planning on the economic opportunity, and we put together questions and they responded back to us. And then that helped us inform how to write and respond back and forth. And because those are the smaller versions, this is the largest piece of the three endeavors, correct?
Geographically,
Well,
largest scale.
citywide.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, you want to go to the suburbs, yeah. We're pretty good. So we're gonna have a lot of ins and outs, lots of questions. And so let's introduce the team from city, oops, sorry.
We need to start our meeting first, so if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm sorry, I
Yes.
go like that. Okay, so Joe Restucci, co-chair, Housing and Human Services, go around the room.
Well, I'm gonna read this first.
Oh, yes.
So I'm Dolores Rubin. I'm filling in for Maria Ortiz, who is the co-chair of Housing, Health and Human Services. So I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting as Joe has, but mention a few things that are mandatory for us to cite. MCB4 has adopted a hybrid meeting policy whereby we meet in person with a remote option. All community board meetings will require an in-person quorum to come to order and conduct business. We do have quorum. Committee members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability or an extraordinary circumstance as defined by the New York State Open Meetings Law. Excused committee members attending remotely can fully participate in the meeting, but must leave their cameras on. And we do have a few members that are participating remotely. Due to the public health best practices and space limitations, we encourage members of the public to join virtually. Members of the public that are attending remotely can fully participate in the meeting. The MCB4 hybrid policy can be found on our website, and tonight's meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube. And now we will introduce everybody in the committee.
I'm Sean Danielle Nolan, member of the committee.
Rachel Lee, committee member. Katie Stokes with my mouth full.
I think we maybe forgot one.
Travis Rogers,
Sorry.
public member of the committee.
Rupert Barnett, a member of the committee.
Hector Vasquez, a member of the committee.
Lisa David, member of the committee.
And we have some other board members here tonight.
Paul Devlin, co-chair of Hell's Kitchen Land Use, member of Chelsea Land Use.
Jeffrey LeBrandt, co-chair of Chelsea Land Use.
And then members of the public.
Brian Wilbur, public member of Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee.
Alexa from NICA.
Hi, I'm Sophia, I'm a reporter of the Streets Law.
And now the city planning team.
Sure. Hi, I'm Abby Ryder, I'm a borough planner at the Department of City Planning.
I am Andy Kumpu, I'm the West Side team leader in the Manhattan office.
And I'm Frank Michelle, the zoning director at City.
So take it away with a lot of text.
Oh yeah, Betty wants to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Betty, I apologize. You are still on mute, Betty, as always.
Betty McIntosh, member of the committee.
Hi Betty. Hey Betty.
Hi, Betty.
Hi.
And I just want to confirm, Jeannie, yeah, Erin.
Oh, yes.
Please, yeah, here it comes. Great.
There we go.
Great. So thank you so much to the Housing, Health and Human Services Committee for hosting our presentation this evening. And I want to say thanks to folks from the Chelsea and Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committees for joining as well. And I really want to just say thank you, first of all, for taking the time to hear about these proposals and discuss the next steps. So here we have the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. We've tailored this presentation, which is an ambitious proposal, as Joe mentioned, to focus on the elements that are most relevant to CB4. I'm expecting this presentation to last about 40 minutes. We'll see how that goes. And I just want to note that this proposal is entering the public review. And Joe, I know you mentioned wanting to go over timeline first. Would you like me to move to that slide?
Why don't you show the timeline in this, that will explain why we had to modify our timeline.
Okay, so Janine, if you can just move, I'm sorry that it's way towards the end. We've got a
What's the
timeline. It's going to be 44.
Right.
So we just entered the referral period 3 days ago. And this is a 60-day community board review that will be going under for City for Housing Opportunity. That public hearing we anticipate to be in about July of 2024, followed by a City Planning Commission vote in September. So I don't know if you want to stop there and discuss anything.
Yeah, I think, and so you understand, that's the reason why we have to work in these steps, because our meeting in July, Jeannie, what is it, the 22nd of the meeting?
25th, maybe, John?
Maybe 25th, yeah, so we will not, our July meeting will not the deadline, so again, adopt a framework in June, and then exec committee will have a full meeting and adopt a full letter and ratified at the July meeting.
Great. Okay, Janine, if you could go back to the beginning, please. Thank you. Okay. So as Joe noted, we'd love to hear any and all questions you have and receive those in writing following tonight's meeting, including either things that come up tonight that we can't answer in the moment or things that, occur to folks as they're sort of digesting the proposal going forward. So we'll be happy to get those questions answered as soon as possible in writing as well. So we're excited to present this to you tonight. It's a proposed citywide text amendment that will change zoning to allow for equitable housing development. City of Yes for Housing Opportunity is a citywide plan that will encourage incremental housing growth over a wide geography by removing barriers to housing growth. Tonight, I'll walk through citywide changes and explain how you can expect this proposal to apply in your neighborhood. In case folks here on the HHS committee don't have the same level of familiarity with zoning terms, I'm not sure how much that applies as colleagues on the land use committees. Please stop me at any point if you don't understand a word or a term that's used. Next slide. While I know this committee is well aware of this fact, I think it's important to underline the obvious before we get into the details of this proposal. New York City faces a severe housing shortage. The vacancy rate for rental apartments is historically low, only at 1.4%, far below a healthy vacancy rate that would provide New Yorkers with housing options. In Manhattan, the vacancy rate is only 2.33%, down from 10% in 2021. Because our housing demand is greater than our housing supply, New Yorkers are experiencing very high housing costs. Over half of New York City renters are rent burdened, meaning that they spend over 30% of their monthly income on rent. Not having enough homes has direct human consequences. One of the most prominent examples of that is homelessness. Each night of 2023, over 92,000 New Yorkers slept in shelters. This included over 33,000 homeless children. Next slide. So the first chart you see on the slide shows housing production over time in New York City. Most of New York City's housing was created in the first half of the 20th century. Since that time, housing production has fallen dramatically. And while it's just one piece of the puzzle, this is in part because zoning has become increasingly restrictive since 1961. At the same time, the demand for housing has increased. As you can see in the second chart, New York City metro area hasn't kept pace with other major cities in terms of housing production. Next slide. This text amendment is the biggest pro-housing change DCP has ever undertaken, and it touches the zoning for every single part of the city. Tonight, we're going to walk through the proposal in general, since it will affect every part of the city, but again, we're going to focus mostly on what's relevant to CD4. We'll start with how the proposal will facilitate more missing middle housing or low-rise apartment buildings in our low-density areas. The proposal also aims to help homeowners in low-density neighborhoods by allowing them to add accessory dwelling units or ADUs to their homes and providing small buildings with additional flexibility to adapt over time. Then we'll talk about medium and high density proposals, where by far the most notable change is Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP, which will allow for bigger buildings for affordable housing in every medium and high density zoning district. And finally, across the city, there are a range of other citywide proposals, including enabling conversion of non-residential buildings to housing, allowing more small and shared apartments, and allowing for infill development on large residential campuses. The proposal will also remove residential parking mandates, which are making housing more expensive. Next slide. First, we'll briefly touch on the changes we're proposing in low density districts, primarily in our outer boroughs. While this doesn't apply directly to CD4, it's important to understand that this proposal really does aim to create a little more housing in every neighborhood in the city. It's also important to understand this on a basic level because CD4 is being asked to vote on this entire proposal. Next slide. Exclusionary zoning rules have made it virtually impossible to build housing in many low-density neighborhoods, placing additional pressure on the high-density parts of the city to produce more housing, which is something CP4 is very familiar with. This wasn't always the case. Small apartment buildings and 2 to 3 family homes are common in all New York City's lower density neighborhoods, and were allowed in many places until as recently as in the 1990s and early 2000s, when stricter zoning prevented them. City of Yes for Housing Opportunity would reintroduce small or modest buildings that are more naturally affordable than other types of construction and apartment buildings at a scale in which they can take advantage of existing affordability programs. Together, these changes allow for the creation of more housing in low-density areas without affecting neighborhood character. Next slide. The town center proposal aims to create more missing middle housing in low-density areas. Missing middle refers to a category of housing that's modest in scale and often affordable to middle-income residents, a once common type of housing that's not often built in the city anymore. This proposal aims to re-legalize mixed-use apartments or buildings with a ground floor commercial use and a few stories of housing on top. This is the classic New York City building type that exists along low-density commercial corridors. Overly complex zoning rules make it almost impossible to build new ones. This proposal streamlines zoning rules, including restrictive limits on floor area and height, so that it is once again feasible to build 2 to 4 stories of housing above a commercial ground floor. Next slide. Our second proposal for missing middle housing is transit-oriented development. This would allow for low-rise buildings, 3 to 5 stories, depending on the underlying zoning, are on sites that are near transit and meet specific criteria. First, the site must be on a block within half a mile of a subway or rail station. Second, the lot must be over 5,000 square feet. And finally, the lot must be located on the short end of the block or wide end of the street, which zoning defines as being over 75 feet wide. Community facilities like faith-based organizations or libraries can use these regulations throughout the city on sites over 5,000 square feet where a community facility is present. Our transit-oriented development rules would promote missing middle housing while also promoting sustainability by adding housing in areas with good transit access. Next slide. In the rest of the low density areas, the proposal aims to give homeowners more flexibility. Under this proposal, a 1 or 2 family home would be allowed to add a small accessory dwelling unit or ADU. There are a range of types of ADUs, including backyard cottages, garage conversions, and basement apartments. These small units would provide important housing options for small households, like a young person moving into their own place for the first time, or an elderly resident who wishes to age in place. Because of their small size, they also serve different income levels than a large single-family home. Successful ADU programs in other places, including Austin, Seattle, and the state of Connecticut, show us that these units can give multi-generational families a little more space and help middle-class homeowners with their household expenses. The proposal includes rules to ensure ADUs are safe. New basement ADUs would not be allowed in coastal floodplain, and no ADUs would be allowed in special coastal districts, areas of our city with the most extreme floodings. Outside of the coastal areas, basement ADUs may be subject to additional regulations review. Next slide. The same rule changes that enable ADUs can also help homeowners that don't want to add an ADU but need more flexibility to adapt or renovate their homes to meet their needs. Our research shows that many existing buildings are out of compliance, meaning that they are not in line with today's rules. For example, R41 districts are 2-family districts, allowing semi-detached buildings like the one you see here. But buildings like these pre-1961 duplexes could not be constructed today because they have more square footage than is currently allowed, and their rear yards are too small. These non-compliances can cause big headaches for homeowners if they need to borrow money from the bank or if they want to make simple changes to their home, like renovating an outdated kitchen. The proposal would fix these rules, which would have dual benefits. First, homeowners of existing buildings won't run into issues when they go to make alterations to their buildings because zoning would be much better matched to what's actually on the ground. Secondly, you'd be able to build a 2-family home in a 2-family district or a multifamily home in a multifamily district, when today the only thing that's feasible is a 1-family home.
I think I missed the question.
Yeah.
This is interesting given the full picture, right?
Yeah.
But because our time is limited tonight, I think it would be helpful if we could move to the medium districts.
Next slide.
Okay, because the truth is, honestly, a lot of the things are fixes to things that already happen, right? It's not any huge increase in density, shape, or feel or height. And that's what our districts on the west side are most interested in. So let's go right into it and get to the meat, all right?
Yeah. Sounds good. Next slide. All right, so we're gonna focus on medium and high density. Next slide. There are 2 key elements to the proposals in medium and high density districts. The cornerstone is really the UAP proposal, or universal affordability preference, which will allow buildings to add at least 20% more housing if additional homes are permanently affordable housing, including supportive housing. It'll replace the existing voluntary inclusionary housing program. We're also proposing updates to mandatory inclusionary housing program, or MIH. Here we want to equalize MIH FARs for districts where the UAP FAR is higher. We're also proposing other changes like allowing the deep affordability option, or MIH option 3, to be a standalone option for developers. Next slide.
Stop on that, because we have to explain that. You have to explain what the standalone option is.
Sure.
We have more detail.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, this is just an
I don't want to
overview.
get too far, you know, moving on.
Absolutely. Next slide. Okay. UAP is modeled after current rules that allow bigger buildings for affordable senior housing in some neighborhoods. Before we begin digging into what the map is showing, I want to caveat that this map only shows what would be allowed in underlying zoning districts. As I'm sure most people in this room are aware, some special districts in CD4 have additional limitations on FAR, such as no heirs preference. We'll discuss special districts in more detail later in the presentation.
So for the committee members, this is an example of one thing we have, only one time we've had this so far in the district. 23rd and 8th, remember that? The building that's being finished, that was a senior building, that was an air building, first time we had that. Because that developer was able to sort of figure out, they had a hard time figuring it out. How to make it work, so you're taking something that we've seen once and now gets applied in a much broader area, right?
This map shows where UAP would broadly apply in the city, which is generally everywhere that the underlying zoning is a medium or high density district or R6 through R10. Through the UAP framework, all forms of affordable and supportive housing would be able to take advantage of higher FARs that are already provided to affordable senior housing in these districts. Right now, most zoning districts allow affordable senior housing to be about 20% bigger than other buildings. However, there are a few districts where that currently don't have the senior housing preference today. In the areas where that's not currently the case, the proposal would create new FARs to enable the growth of affordable and supportive housing in every neighborhood. The proposal would also make sure that zoning provides room to build extra affordable housing required through UAP. So there will be limited height increases where it's necessary to make enough room for these affordable homes. Next, I'm going to walk you through how UAP would apply in a couple different scenarios. Next slide. So here's an example of how UAP would function in the construction of new mixed income housing. A developer has a vacant site in sub-district F, for example, of the special West Chelsea district and plans to build a mixed income building that includes market rate and affordable units. The yellow in the drawing shows the additional floor area a developer can build if they include affordable housing. In reality, the affordable housing would be distributed throughout the building. We're just showing you that extra in yellow on the top. Today, they'd get 5.0 FAR regardless of whether they're developing market rate or affordable. This would allow them to build about 60 units. Note that as it stands today, Subdistrict F is ineligible for Affordable Housing Fund or IH program. Under UAP, they'd get 6.0 FAR, but note that one extra FAR could only be used for affordable housing. If it is, they could build about 10 to 12 more affordable units. The building would also be allowed to be 30 feet taller than it is today. 10 to 12 more affordable units may not sound like a lot, but this is functioning at a citywide scale. If every project has a few more affordable units, we can add a significant amount of affordable housing citywide. Next slide.
So it said 45 feet on the slide.
that.
You said it was.
There was a typo. Okay, sorry. That's okay.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can send out a corrected.
So I'm sorry, is it 30 feet or 45?
Can you go back one to just, tell us, yeah. So go back one slide, Janine, yeah.
There you go, thank you.
The last line.
The regulation, the change to the regulation would allow for an additional 45 feet. So the talking point was old.
So the slide is correct.
The slide is correct.
Okay. So, just a quick question, no, I just see that in the representation, those two floors are 45 feet tall?
No, I think this is an illustrative
I know, I'm
drawing
saying
that,
that's not, it's a little bit confusing because
yeah.
that's not correct.
Right, I think, so we were given slides that sort of were meant to represent neighborhoods across the city, and we were customizing these slides to try and fit CD4, and sometimes, you know, it's a little bit mismatched, so the massing is a little bit not exactly illustrated, but it's just meant to show the point that we're adding sort of incrementally 20% more floor area.
Right, but the effect would be is that it actually would be 3 floors taller.
Right.
And I think as we go through this and you get to the other districts, the districts, those heights that were, especially in West Chelsea, where they're crafted, it's figure out how to manage that too. That's all. Right. Even showing it, let alone talking about it.
And is there a formula for how you've adjusted the height factors in the special districts?
The heights, you mean?
Yes.
We tried to use in like the normal zoning, like say a 6 FAR district gets a certain height. And so we tried to just use those.
Oh, if we can move to the next slide. Okay, so this next example, we have a city-owned site in an R8B district that's going to be used entirely for affordable housing. Today, R8B districts do not have preferential FAR for senior housing, so this site would be limited to 47 units, no matter what kind of housing they were providing. We're proposing R8B districts and all other districts with no existing senior housing preference or very small senior housing preferences to receive a 20% bump for affordable housing. In R8B, this means a 4.8 FAR of affordable housing. This building would also be allowed 30 feet taller now. I want to make sure I got that right. Than anything.
Not much.
In this example, that translates to an additional 9 to 10 permanently affordable homes. Next slide.
So a 0.8 bump.
It's like 20%.
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
All right, so we want to make sure that every medium and high density zoning district has a preference for affordable housing in order to encourage incremental housing, affordable housing growth throughout the entire city. We also want to make sure that buildings can actually fit this affordable housing. So we're proposing height increases so that affordable FARs can actually be realized and not just something theoretical. The table you see here shows the proposed adjustments to both the basic and the UAP FARs, as well as to the height limits to accommodate the additional UAP FAR. And this is R6 through R8. You're seeing here.
so let me stop a second for a moment. General consumption, right? We frequently have R8 districts or R9 districts, right? Our R10 districts are along the avenues, the very high rise sort of things. In essence, this proposal, and Frank, you tell me if I'm saying this incorrectly, takes what is an R8 today and makes it an R9. Because it's today a 6.02 FAR, goes to 7.2. That's really an R9 district as of today's zoning.
It allows, I mean, the interesting thing about that is like, if you were building affordable senior housing, you can get to that.
I understand that. No, I'm saying,
So,
it takes the principle of, makes it any kind of affordability, that's number one. I think everyone feels good about that.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if that's a general, doesn't matter what slice you're in. Affordable housing is affordable housing, right? But on the density and on the height issues, it takes what is today the R9 density and the base height and the overall height and moves that now to R8. So our less dense districts now mirror our more dense districts. Right? That's
If you provide affordable housing.
I was gonna say,
I know.
if the
always
developer.
we provide affordable housing. I'm just saying, in the built environment that results, what is mapped R8 is now R9, right? So that's.
Question, because I know that you are indicating, the difference between the R5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, why? So currently, we do have a different, because in our special districts,
Yeah, narrow streets and wide streets.
it's narrow streets, not.
Yeah, not lot, narrow streets, wide streets, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
And that differentiation is 60 to 75 in terms of footage of a street.
Basically, any street that's like wider than 75 feet, so like the avenues here, they get.
In our world, it's the avenues.
Yep.
Other places. a little different.
That's all. Thank you.
The
Lisa?
FARs aren't all 20% more in the proposed versus the base?
So some of those exist today. Remember how Abby was talking about
Based
that
on
affordable senior?
senior housing.
Yeah, so like those we kept and those places where, sorry, those places where like we.
Frank, you've been around.
Spent a lot of time. Those places where we didn't have an affordable housing FAR, we gave them that 20%, because that's the number that's like typical. We all sort of think about it. And we want to make sure that that was ever.
Okay, thanks.
Question concerning the utility floors with the air conditioning units and everything, is that included in that as well?
Usually, it depends on where you are in different special districts. The building height is a certain thing, and then you're allowed to do like an elevator.
No, he was asking about voids.
Oh,
So, not utility on top.
Right.
Remember,
Oh,
we want to make sure that this whole thing,
Yeah.
and no one puts 4 floors of bullshit in it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
And those are the rules.
City planning.
No, so these all, so the voids issue that where people were building like really tall buildings and like.
And then just pushing the whole building.
When you have heights like these are all like you're capped at a maximum height, and so they're meant to just basically fit the floor area. And so you don't really, it's only really in those like tower districts where you sort of have infinite height, where people have the.
Where there is no height limit. All of these, a lot of them have some sort of suffix on the end, A, B, C, X, that sets height limits. When you don't have it, the sky's the limit.
That's right.
And that's how the voids get.
Your Hudson Yards, your 42nd Street towers, that's,
Thanks.
yeah.
All right, we can go to the next slide, which is another chart.
Lisa, did you ask your question?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so just like the last table, you can see here that the height adjustments we are proposing are for R9 through R12 districts, along with the base and FAR, or basic and proposed FAR here. In the interest of time, we won't go through all these now, but we've provided these slides to Jesse, and you can take a look after this meeting if you want to. Next slide.
So let's just stay with that for a second. So again, impact, right, immediate, what it is that there were certain issues with base heights that were negotiated in various rezonings in order to connect context existing streets and the rest of the neighborhood. That's a major change. And the overall building height, a major change too. So again, we have to figure out how we manage through it. I'm very interested in how to make this work, but not just discard anything prior to today. That's a big concern. You know, a lot of the proposals and the work the community has done with the special districts have been distributing here, more density over there, less density here, height over there, not height over here. We got to figure out in this mix, which is not the usual case, how do we make it work? So I just put that to the
Just the crux of the problem. You're fixing big problems across the entire city. We know that the density doesn't exist in places because it's been restricted. We already provide the density here. Right, we do. And we do historically bring a ton of affordability in almost every opportunity we can. The fair share is what you're trying to solve for. But what you're doing in that whole process is you're saying every single bit of hard fought zoning that we put in place to create the context, the community context is relevant now. That's the crux of it.
By the way, I think there's a way. Put on the table, but I want to say.
disagree with that characterization, but we can.
But I want to say on the table, right? But I didn't make a jump. I want you to continue to put it out there because I believe there's a way to figure this out.
Yeah.
So I want to continue.
Great.
No. Sorry.
Next slide, please. Next slide.
Oh, and we see for the first time this one with the new zones, right?
No, she already showed that.
Yeah, but we didn't mention it.
But we have a slide that talks specifically about the new
Right.
R11 and R12
Okay.
districts.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a question about that.
Yeah, do we still have Janine?
Yeah.
Janine, do we?
Well,
So Janine, you're still here. Okay.
Janine's here.
I'm still here.
Next one.
Yep, next slide. Okay, sorry, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay, so here you can just see a quick illustrative example of how UAP would impact the built form. On the left, you see a proposed development without UAP, and on the right is the additional 20% of FAR that would be included with a building that provides permanently affordable housing in the area. Again, the point here is really about incremental growth and the modest impact overall to the built form that we're proposing.
I just want to note that unlike those sort of like off the shelf massings that we saw. in
This is
those
real.
earlier. This is real. There's an actual analysis that was done that shows in real life what 20%.
And like building, everything, so you grab the location, there's real buildings around it, and you pop the new building
And you added shading.
in. Okay,
Okay, great.
Just a question about the height on the universal affordability preference. I see it's higher, but does that also mean that the top floors are affordable, or is it just a mix and match?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've heard this, you're only the second.
Market rate, the top floors are usually more expensive, so.
Absolutely, yeah, you guys are actually the second community board in Manhattan that we're presenting, and we heard this last night, so it's a good question. It's a bit confusing from those earlier pictures we were showing, but that was just to illustrate the additional, there would be a mix throughout, they wouldn't be prescribed to having those affordable units that are permanently affordable on the top.
so let's hold on for a second. Not a mix throughout. Is it gonna be governed by the current MIH rules? Okay, so then we're going to say no. Yeah. Because the current MIH rules are 70% of the floors. Our community board has been successful in going to 80 or 90% of the floors throughout the building. If you are proposing a citywide text change, you should propose citywide integration. And let's cut the foolishness that the upper income units will not end up being on the top floors. Seriously, I mean, citywide things, let's figure out citywide, right? And we have fought, actually, to those meetings, frankly, over and over and over with individual developers, had HPD push back on us and actually had developers agree with us, they'll do more integration for our building. And in this case, if the playing field is the same throughout, then the integration should be full.
Yep, we hear you, let's keep talking about it and appreciate any comments you have to submit on that too. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so let's just talk a bit about voluntary inclusionary housing and how that relates to UAP. As I mentioned earlier, UAP is going to replace voluntary inclusionary housing, including inclusionary housing designated areas and R10 districts and equivalents. Like UAP, these are optional zoning tools to incentivize the creation of affordable housing. As you can see on the map, VIH covers a relatively limited part of the city. UAP will extend a preference for affordable housing citywide to all medium and high density zoning districts. UAP has other benefits compared to VIH, including a lower AMI, which would be 60% AMI for UAP, and allowing income averaging to provide housing at a wider range of incomes rather than the narrow 80% AMI band with VIH. Next slide. VIH is an optional affordable housing tool, like I just said, which is available in areas of CB4. Today, VIH covers only 13% of medium and high density areas overall. VIH AMIs are about 80%, like we just said, which would roughly translate to $101,000 income for a family of 3. UAP will replace voluntary inclusionary housing, and what we're so excited about here again is achieving deeper affordability and allowing for income averaging. Mandatory inclusionary housing will continue to be mapped and existing affordability requirements will remain in place. Practically, this means there could be a mix of homes at different income levels, including more deeply affordable units and slightly higher income units. The table on the slide shows an example of what that mix might look like. Next slide.
Hold on a second, question again. So why, if you are unpacking a new idea, universal affordability preference, and you're removing VIH, why is not MIH also folded into the whole thing? Like, why are we, if you consider this to be a progression ahead, right, in terms of getting a citywide standard, why retain MIH? If it does what VAH does,
I think the.
it's just that, one says you must, the other one said, actually, it's the same program. One says you must and one says you could.
Right.
So now if you're getting rid of the, you could, why not just make one standard and you're desperate about making zoning clearer or applicable citywide, why keep that? Even though it's recently enacted, why keep it? I mean, this as a true policy question.
No, I was just asking a clarifying question. Are you saying you would rather MIH apply across the board or?
No, if you have a new standard for the universal affordability, why not make that the new standard? Why not make one standard? That's my question.
I think so the idea with MIH is like we apply it when the commission applies it, when we do a significant upselling, right? 30, 40, 50%, 100% increase in housing opportunity.
Our west side.
Yeah, like
All of
if we had done Hudson Yards in 2020 as opposed to 2005.
Right.
So in those instances, to guarantee that there will be an affordable housing requirement on the site, we apply MIH. Also, the numbers usually are higher, so the percentage of affordability is higher. Usually it's 25, 30%.
Right.
And so the idea is always that like, as the city as people come with private applications to rezone sites, we're gonna wanna keep MIH and keep a higher affordability requirement as part of those rezonings. So I think that it's that reality that like, we are trying to do a lot here to try to make housing, to try to address housing issues. But we know that like people are still willing to propose rezonings and want to go from a building that's this big to a building that's like this big. And MI should still be an option for that too.
So you're saying you need that tool?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So, but let me say to you again, let's say we take 8th Avenue in the 40s and 50s. That's currently VAH. And there are some sites yet to be developed there, right?
Yep.
Instead of having the universal affordability preference gets us 20%, why isn't there a portion that gets us the 25 or 30%? That is a requirement. Because if we're looking to move to requirements, right? Or when you put out it's an option. In a high density district, people are gonna take it, period. It is so rare. We've seen one developer build an R10 and not go to a 12. So I'm just trying to see how in this, use the opportunity of this action to seek more housing in our high density areas to move it from a 20% requirement up. And I turn to Roberta thinking about that. That's a real policy thing. If we can try to get an increment in the high density areas, that helps us. That where it already exists.
Certainly. I don't know if that was a question that.
No. Good luck. No, Roberta like me as a policy person, so it's like thinking, here's an opportunity, right? That's why I said, why, so you get it, it's you're trying to get more affordability.
Sure.
But now we have high density corridors. Why do we try to extract more affordability out of our high density corridors?
Right.
So you're asking, why don't we apply MIH to like R10s?
I'm asking you, any tool you got in the toolbox.
Isn't one discretionary and one as of, right, and the whole point
right,
is
but what
that
they're
you
doing
get more
is-
if you go discretionary.
Right, the thing is, they're taking this discretionary and making it a lot more straightforward, that's what it is, right? Why
But it's
not?
still discretionary.
Right.
But it sounds like you're saying, well, instead of it being 20% discretionary, instead of it being 20%, let's make it 25%.
Right. What I'm trying to do is figure out how to you're trying to mine the city to get more affordable housing. We're a district that has some high density zones already. How do we mine those high density zones to get us more affordable housing? I know it's an idea for you to think about.
Yeah, let us noodle on that a little bit and get you a more positive response.
Is that like just there should be more housing, like, or is that in exchange for
I didn't get to that
less
part yet.
elsewhere? Because that's.
No. I didn't get to that part at all. I'm more like, let's figure out a way, because what we excel as a community board is looking at the full picture.
Mhm.
And if we can get more here, less here, but it gets us more total, wow, that's an idea, you know?
Right, we're gonna be looking forward to hearing from you guys.
Just one comment, is it just for new buildings being proposed or?
Additions,
Is it additions as well?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, so what would be the,
This is,
I guess
a proposal that will fuel additions throughout the entire city.
right, but what would be the strategy to get some of these existing buildings to encourage them, I guess, to do the expansions up top?
Read.
There you go, obvious, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we have to be thoughtful about here is that this is a good thing overall, there's no question, right? But there's gonna be unintended consequences. Higher density and higher buildings will create problems for existing buildings with existing tenants, existing rent stabilized housing, because it creates a higher value, right? So if you can go from 12 to 14 stories, if you can go from X to Y, it's gonna create a problem. It just will. And that's our direct community experience. So how we do that, we have to figure out how to manage it. So you can't be impenetrable about this, it's how to manage it is the question.
Always the details, but it's always doable, as long as you focus on the details.
Go ahead, gotcha.
Sorry, now I've. All right, so I think we haven't gone through this yet, so let me get to this. Okay, so these are updates to MIH. The housing opportunity proposal is going to make some updates to MIH as we've talked about before. The first proposal in this series was requested by the city council speaker and many city council members and housing advocates, which is to allow MIH option 3 to be a standalone option. So like Joe said, we can break this down a little bit for folks in the room, but basically there's 3 options under MIH, and the first 2 are 20 and 25% set aside.
25.
Or sorry, 20.
Option 1 is 25% set aside, option 2 is 30% set aside, and then when MIH is mapped, one can combine the deep affordability option, what it's called today, with one of those 2 main options. And then as part of this proposal, we're breaking that deep affordability option out into a standalone option 3. So you could have 20% of your floor area be affordable at a lower AMI, 40%.
So
Everybody got that, right? Just make sure.
So our proposal also will equalize MIH FARs in districts where UAP FAR is higher. So for example, an R6A district with MIH FAR will change from 3.6 to 3.9. It's important to note that the options, like we just discussed, will remain in place, meaning that the same percentage of affordability will continue to be required.
That's just conformance.
Finally, we're proposing to streamline rules for 100% affordable projects. Some projects in Manhattan CD4 we know have had crazy administrative difficulty. Our housing team was noting for us again today about this, complying with IH requirements. Under the new regime, 100% affordable projects would not be subject to overlapping and conflicting requirements in the zoning text. This proposal would exempt 100% affordable home ownership projects from rules that prevent them from penciling out. The current MIH program is also incompatible with tools that facilitate affordable home ownership. So this is, again, just trying to make life easier for everyone involved and again, get us to that goal of more affordable projects overall and in an easier time for everyone. Okay, next slide. So we've got another example here, and I can slow down.
That's familiar.
But this one is different. And it's one, same building, but it's nice.
Let's do use our imagination
I'm
here.
glad you do this with us, we can laugh.
All right, so here we've got an example of how this proposal affects a mandatory inclusionary housing area. Let's say we've got a site here that's in an R9 district. It was recently rezoned and is therefore subject to MIH. The current maximum MIH FAR is 8.0 FAR under quality housing rules. which on this site would result in 96 units, 25 of which must be, or sorry, 25%, yes, which should be permanently affordable, or 24 units. Depending on the MIH area, 25 to 30% of units would be required to be affordable, like we were just discussing. Because of the UAP FAR in R9 districts being 9.02, the MIH FAR will also be raised to 9.02, but the 25 to 30% affordability requirement will remain in place. In this scenario, that would mean approximately 108 total units would be created, 25% of which, again, the 24 units would be permanently affordable, an increase of 12 affordable units overall. And the building would be allowed to be 10 to 20 feet taller.
Excuse me, on that diagram, the dotted blue line is the new height, is that correct? There's the yellow.
Yeah.
The yellow.
The impression is, so the yellow is what is currently existing.
No,
No, that's,
that's the addition,
okay, what is the dotted blue line?
the remnant, I'm gonna guarantee you, right?
The remaining, right?
No, I think it is a graphic remnant,
Yeah, on the slide.
No,
you know?
You refer to it as a building on the word.
Yes, it comes up to here and here. It's very hard to see, but.
Oh, I see, I just said,
It's-
Is that the setback?
what is that?
I don't know whether they're trying to represent the actual maximum building envelope.
But it's not, the building envelope, you can't have setback anyway.
Right.
We should check.
We'll check.
We can all acknowledge that some of the drawings are.
Just note that
Yes,
the dotted blue line's been on all the drawings.
Yes.
I did not see it until you know, you're closer, yes, Paul.
We also just said it's an increase of 12 affordable units, really increase of 3 affordable.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
From
Sorry.
24 to 27.
Overall. increase.
12 units overall,
But.
Three additional.
Three additional, yes. Okay.
You don't send us a corrected version.
Yeah.
Down the road, right, okay.
It's correct on the slide.
Yeah,
I
the words
apologize,
are
some of my notes here are not.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're gonna move on from UAP, MIH, all this mid and high density on to citywide proposals. Next slide. So the first thing we're going to do here is talk about creating new zoning districts. This proposal includes the creation of new zoning districts above 12 FAR. The maximum FAR for R11 and R12 districts will be 15 and 18 FAR respectively. These zoning districts can only be mapped with MIH, like Frank was talking about earlier. And in addition, this proposal would create 2 new medium density districts, R62 and R60. These new districts being proposed are intended to fill the gap in the existing spectrum of zoning districts. It's important to note that no mapping actions are part of the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity proposal, meaning that a separate action would be required to actually map these districts if appropriate locations are identified at that time.
This creates the text in order to do the mapping in the future.
Yeah. Next slide. The next proposal is campus infill. This proposal would also make it easier to add contextual infill to campuses and other irregular or challenged sites. Previous campus development often took place under tower and park style regulations called height factor. Although DCP has developed a more recent set of regulations for contextual buildings that have height limits and result in better designs, some sites like NYCHA campuses can't access these rules. The proposed changes would allow height limited infill on sites that would otherwise be forced to develop tall, skinny buildings or nothing at all.
And that will apply to any underlying zone.
If you're a district that doesn't have like a letter. Like
Right. But yeah, like R8 or R10, or you got it, okay.
A variety of other changes would address barriers faced by irregular or challenged sites, like these, including, making, more sites, eligible for contextual envelopes and eliminating the outdated sliver law in favor of height-limited contextual envelopes.
The civil law?
Yeah, can you describe what this law is?
So buildings in high density parts of the city, so R7 and all the way up. If your lot is, or if your building is less than 45 feet wide, this zoning rule, which it predates all of our height limit rules.
Right.
It says, because there was concerns that like the old zoning would allow you to do a tall skinny building.
Gather it up.
No, I-
Yeah. So the idea is, what that rule would tend to do is say, you have to be basically the width of the street. So, the side streets here are 60 feet, so your building will be 60 feet tall, Maryland Avenue to be 100 feet tall. Which is good, in general, but one of the things that over time, as we've mapped more, let's call them like letter districts, like the contextuals. It often means that like the zoning district, if a building was 46 feet tall, may be able to go to 75 feet. And may be able to use UAP to go maybe even higher, but because it's sliver, you're still stuck at the width of the street. And so we would allow it to, what the proposal is you would have to follow the contextual rules. Like you couldn't build a super tall skinny tower, you would have to build under the ones that have the height limits. So we think we're trying to like find, again, under the idea of like trying to find all the ways that zoning may be acting as a barrier to housing. We think this one, in doing it this way, respects the zoning that's in place. And would allow people, even on, let's call it narrower lots, to be able to build on.
Remember we had on land use, the 37th Street project that got stuck in a series of technical things
That's
that it could not go even to the height of the contextual district. We did a little text fix.
That's right, yeah.
The one between 90% by Brooklyn Fair.
So this, we want to eliminate pencil buildings. That's, like, I'm thinking the garment district right now, we're going through this new town, so.
If it were zoned at a contextual zone, and it is not currently proposed to be zoned as a contextual zone, nor with height limits. This is for areas, is that correct?
I think, I'm just waiting for you to finish, but I think, yeah, I think the idea is like, you have to follow the contextual rule, so you're not in the tower.
You're on the tower and park thing at all.
Yeah, so like when you have those options, like some, say campuses, when you don't have the height limits, you do have the ability through the existing zoning to build taller. You just, and in those instances, like if you were, I think we described this as like an R8 or so. If this was an R8 district and you were like 40 feet wide and you were trying to build under the like, rules that could like, let you build like a 200-foot tall building, you'd be stuck back at the width of the street.
Well, if the garment center from MSMX had an R10A or R11A, whatever, there would be height limits as part of it.
That's right.
And it's not, we're not there yet on that, but that's the way to deal with the whole issue, of getting the density without the pencil. That's a specific goal we have.
What about air rights as far as expansion over another property? I mean, we've seen some buildings where actually it's all like a chip over another.
Cantilever road.
Right, cantilever. I mean, is that included in the restrictions here or?
It doesn't, I'm not sure what would have to be done to do, it's interesting, once a building sort of gets any part wider, they are able to just use the zoning rules today. Like they could build up to the maximum heights, not just the width of the street.
You're seeing that mostly, Hector, in areas that don't have a height limit. That whole cantilever thing.
But that actually overrides the height, I mean, it's a way to get away from the height limits.
No,
Get that property.
The
square.
where you see it mostly, there are no height limits.
Right.
The majority of places that is built, right, there's not a height limit.
That is true.
Yeah. Take this away, have you?
Good discussion.
We're at 40 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I mean, you got to the question. Keep going. No, because these are the citywide ones, gonna get the parking, for example, right? So,
Yep.
go ahead.
Okay, I think we've got one more slide on campus info. If we, next slide, please. Okay, so campuses are defined as sites 1.5 acres or larger, or sites that have full control of the block. In medium and high density areas, the proposal would do two things. First, it would replace mixing rules that prevent zoning lots from being developed with height factor buildings, from adding contextual height limited buildings. Second, it would align the distance between buildings with the existing multiple dwelling law. In practice, this means a 40-foot distance between buildings must be maintained, or for buildings that are over 125 feet, the distance must be at least 80 feet between buildings.
And I also don't know what the dotted line means in this diagram.
But that's actually something that conforms the zoning rules to the state multiple dwelling.
Right.
Correct?
And then, real quickly, so, sorry, and because this is for medium and high density areas, this has not, like, these rules don't apply to the ADUs or anything. They don't, because the ADUs are only in the low density areas, right? Because I was gonna say you are gonna allow things to be built closer, but that's only in the low density areas.
Right, and there are some components to the campus infill rules that we just didn't focus on for this presentation for low density districts, but we can provide.
Yeah,
more
we really,
information on that.
we don't have one. This is,
Right.
our applicability here is Chelsea, NYCHA, Harbor View, Penn South. That's the kind of campus that we have, that this is applying.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, that's good to know there are other rules about the ADUs, thank you.
So Mitchell Lamas might apply to also
Which,
from a campus, 74710, 7.
no,
First and 10 on the south side.
no, it's entirely a block
I
of
think
hills.
all their hard Steve.
The blocks. There's nothing, no, that's on the campus, what do you think? Okay.
Okay, next slide. So now we're gonna talk about small and shared apartments. This proposal would remove outdated rules to allow for more small and shared apartments. What this means is allowing buildings with only simple no-frill studios, as well as homes with private bedrooms, but shared kitchens or other common facilities. These building types have historically played an important role in New York's housing landscape, especially for young working New Yorkers who need a place to stay while they get their feet under them. New small and shared apartments can provide important housing choices for New Yorkers, especially marginally housed New Yorkers and people who would prefer to live alone but can't afford to do so. Today, we're forcing many people into living situations they don't want. In some cases, that includes doubling up in an overcrowded unit. But our lack of housing options is also what forces young professionals to team up with roommates and occupy family-sized units. Allowing more small and shared housing apartments could ease the pressure on these larger units. Next slide, next slide. Our current zoning doesn't have a clear path for building shared housing. So housing opportunity would create rules and make the process less complex in order to enable a fuller range of shared housing options. These updated rules would make it possible to build shared housing in any multi-family zoning district. The proposal would also enable the development of new construction shared housing, including affordable shared housing. Housing Opportunity is also seeking to legalize existing unregulated shared housing. Other cities have already re-legalized this kind of housing and found that it met a need in their housing markets.
So, I find this statement like lovely and shocking, right? Shocking. No, it's not shocking. It isn't. No, actually, it is so common that people are sharing apartments. It's not even a question today. They can't even afford not to share. But as a producer of affordable housing, we have built shared housing since 1995. And I think you're gonna have to help your housing agency along with this. Because they actually, on a project that our committee is very familiar with, Hartley House, have said they do not want any shared housing in a conversion of a settlement house to 100% affordable housing. I think we have this kind of stuff where, are we gonna get a line finally? Because I found it was a struggle to build shared housing, and we could do it as a not-for-profit, because we had that, was carved out for that. So now we're gonna allow the private market to do it, but shouldn't we also be working on the housing side to, if we're gonna all do this, let's agree?
From HPD's perspective, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're doing a citywide zoning change. And the answer is no, we don't want any shared units, we want all studios.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what HPD's position was on that specific project. I
No,
know
not
that-
the project, thing in general.
I know that in general, they are like, we've talked to them ad nauseum about this proposal. They're supportive of it. I assume that, you know, should the proposal pass, they're gonna do everything they can to try and finance those types of projects and get it off the ground.
From your mouth to God's ears, but another question for you is, these kind of units built, will they be rent stabilized? Because in the production that I have built them, that triple shared unit is 3 units, and there's 3 rent stabilized leases. How are you ensuring, in connection with HCR from the state, that they are now rent stabilized units? Because that's what protects people here. So that would be apartment 2A, and each individual on the hallway, and then 2A1, 2A2, and 2A3, each with a person's own rent stabilized lease. So if there's any problem with somebody moves out, and the next person knows they're in a rent stabilized unit, it doesn't matter that Harry moved out next door, they get to stay there. So when you say shared housing, there could, from the leasing part of it, it's gotta be functional. How does that work?
That's a good question.
That's a good question. I don't know the specifics.
Okay.
That's a great question.
But also for you guys on the DOB side,
Yeah,
the C of O has gotta say
right.
3 units, not 1 unit. Because people reject it. Somebody can have a lease and then the other people, you know, we don't want that.
Can I ask a quick question about the small apartments? Have the sort of, has the size been worked out yet?
So the zoning is only like one piece of the puzzle here. So the zoning, even today, what the zoning actually does is it says you actually, all of the units in the building have to come to an average number of size. So it's like, usually it's like 680 square feet. What comes, it doesn't mean you can't have a unit smaller than that. But in total, it has to balance out with larger units. And what that often means is no one really does it. Forgetting the zoning for a second, the rules that really regulate the size of the units are building code and housing maintenance code. So other city laws.
I would like factor them.
Yeah, usually when you add those all up and you actually try to lay out a unit, I've always seen the numbers as like 300 to 325 square feet.
Is a minimum.
As a minimum, yes, that's right.
So I've seen in a different community proposals for 200 square feet, people are like, who could live in 200, you know? Yeah.
We have people living in 200 square feet.
Right, but do we want, I mean, I'm trying to figure out, is that gonna be allowed or sort of, yeah, what the rules are, if it's being proposed, or it sounds like it's not gonna be included in this.
Yeah, those rules are not being changed as part of this, right? Those are just the building code, the maintenance code, like they have to go through other processes, the city proposal changes to that. That would affect everything.
Great,
But what we are changing is those dwelling unit factors, which that 680 average square feet that Frank was talking about.
Yeah,
We are in the sort of what we call the inner transit zone, which basically applies to all of Manhattan. We're eliminating the dwelling unit factor entirely. So, sorry.
can you say that?
Yeah, exactly. Is there a slide on that? I think we.
Thanks, let me go back. Andy, you can keep talking about that.
So I think there was a project, I think it was in the East Village, do you remember? Was it
Parliament Place.
Yeah, Parliament Place. This nonprofit developer wanted to build an all studio apartment building. And they could not do it because of the zoning, right? And they had to get a zoning override, I believe, mayoral zoning override, and it took a really long time and a lot of money and a lot of effort to house, I think it was 100 units, maybe.
Okay.
Around that. This would allow that type of development to occur as of right. So you could build a building that's all studios.
So we could have entire parts of the core just be for single people. Is that a healthy development of the city? I'm not saying you should not be able to do that, but is that without any, this is the, see, these kinds of, I have Travis writing this up behind you. I think the thing that I see here is that there's a lot of different elements here that on their own make a lot of goddamn sense. But we're back in the unintended consequences issue, right? In the Clinton Special Zoning District, you're required to have 20% 2 bedrooms, and that was specifically as a requirement to make sure we continue to produce family apartments for households to grow and change over time. If you're saying that you could, as of right, anywhere in Manhattan, I'm assuming, or below 60 or whatever this is, have a building that has 100% studios,
That's what we'll go.
that's what we're gonna get, because that's the highest value. You know, and I'm sorry, we should not be building dorms.
And it's also short-sighted, so.
Very short-sighted, so it's gonna change this.
It's based off having a transient community in which you're having single individuals, that you're not allowing them to develop families and communities within that neighborhood. So for instance.
I'm glad you probably, but this is like.
Yeah.
For instance, if I wanted teachers and social workers to live in our community, 2 single teachers would meet each other, and they're housing these 2 individual studios, how do they develop, how do they then move them to try to develop family?
Even within that building, you can't even.
Within the building, they can't do that, so we lose them out of our community.
Exactly. But I think I'm not, sorry. Can you just finish the answer? So you said you're getting rid of the.
The dwelling unit factor,
The
which
dwelling
is
unit
like
factor.
the average size, average unit size across a building.
Okay. So, and so you're saying that then a building could be all studios?
Potentially.
Not potentially, financially, that drives it in that direction.
Yeah.
In Manhattan,
I mean, just to be honest,
That's
like,
all the built.
it is not like even the number that most buildings in Manhattan that are getting constructed are never approaching even the density factor we have today. The units are much larger. Like, I mean, you can, I think we can debate about like the cost implications, but I think the general idea is when we made changes to the density factor a couple of years ago to bring it from like 790 to 680. And then didn't change anything because people in areas, higher density areas, higher value areas are building like 1,000 or 1,500 or thousands of square foot units. And like those density numbers are never.
They're actually not doing that in our district. They're only doing that for the ownership stuff. They're not building large rental apartments.
The other thing that I would add, and I do think is important, is within the as of right tax exemption. Previously 421A, now 485, we do have those 2-bedroom requirements. And so if they want to take advantage of that, which almost every residential building, not literally every residential building, but almost, they then have to include those 2 bedrooms.
Right, but developers walk through water. I can build a building of 200 studios. I get 200 studio rents. I am not gonna need all those other benefits because I am getting 200 studio rents at $3,500 a month. And I will be able to finance that in this district. And I'm
But
concerned.
that wouldn't actually qualify under these rules because those wouldn't be,
Yes,
not at $3,500 for a studio.
no, this is not about the affordability issue. It says no, it says, it says a general change. I have a plot of land, I can build a market rate building. And it can be 100% studios. And I don't need therefore to get a tax exempt bond or something like this, because the truth is, I can do it.
I don't know, I mean, I could be entirely like wrong, but my understanding, and please correct me if there's further information, I think it might be a question, but just what would a pro forma look like for such a project? Like, is it financeable? Is it preferable? Is it more profitable? I don't know the answer to that question.
I think, let me just sort of, make a statement about our intent here, and then we can move on, because I think this is a really worthwhile conversation and it's worth having. But I think when we have things like dwelling unit factor or minimum bedroom size, we have sort of like a regulatory lever that's not necessarily aligned with the policy outcome that we want. Because what we see when we have these rules is we see singles who double and triple up, who have that money to outbid families, and they move into these family size units. So it's not the case where, you know, you want to create family size units, but the people moving into them by and large are wealthier singles. They're not necessarily families. So we think that a worthy goal of this proposal is to allow the market to create more smaller units, more studios, more one bedrooms, so that those wealthier singles are not pricing out the single mother with 3 kids who can't get into a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment because they're all being outbid.
Yeah, so by the way, you know, that honestly, like that is, I like what you said at first. You have one lever, creating consequence, whatever. I think the intent is correct. The current means and methods has the ability to do huge unintended consequences. Because the difference is that when that folks sharing the apartment, somebody is together with somebody else, the room moves out, and the girlfriend or boyfriend moves in, and a family's created in that 2-bedroom apartment. And this ability for people within a building to move around and change. In this scenario, there's got to be a way to manage the change in the dwelling unit factor that doesn't give you only the overwhelming studios, and the overwhelming smaller apartments. I know what you're trying to do. I agree.
Backward question, the shared housing.
Right.
Would that incentivize people to divide up apartments? And get more rent out of that?
You mean existing
Yeah,
apartments?
Conversion. Does it apply to conversion?
That's a good question.
Well, I mean, that's again, a social issue.
Does it?
I'm sorry.
Just want to make sure, which does what apply to conversion?
Shared housing.
Does this, would that
Yes, all of
incentivize
those, yeah.
landlords to divide up those big apartments to get more rent? And have, I mean, the scenario is kind of
That,
spooky.
isn't that the sort of thing, I'm thinking about like my daughter and her roommate right now, right? It's sort of shared housing, you know, they each have a room and they share a kitchen and a living room, right? And they each have separate leases with the landlord.
Right.
So.
That's rare. That's super rare. It's the opposite.
JD, I don't think practically, I think taking an existing written like normal apartment building where you have like sanitary facilities and kitchens for every unit and then dividing them.
No, I'm saying there's a building, they have 2 or 3 bedrooms, that those 2 or 3 bedroom units get divided. And are now they're shared housing.
Okay.
We have to make sure there's no incentive to take a large family building, Upper West Side or West 50s for us and convert it into shared housing, right? That's another, these are all things like, it's unintended consequences. How do we manage that?
You're concerned about things being turned into rooming houses and that essentially.
Well, that's what happens in all these places, you know, I mean.
Also for the people who live in the building, if you have all these apartments suddenly converted to 3 or 4 little apartments, that changes the whole living experience for the entire building. How do you manage that?
Right, and also the conversion in that respect, it puts a lot of stress, particularly in older buildings, in terms of the management of the building, the actual facility itself. I mean, you're thinking about,
You're right, you're not gonna be replacing all the plumbing at that point in time, you're just doing internal conversion.
yeah, and in theory, you might say, okay, well, you're only adding like maybe 50 people, but if it's an older building and you've been able to split all this up and all of a sudden the demand on the air conditioning or the heating or whatever.
I just throw this out to you as an idea on the management part, maybe it's about rent stabilized units, if there's a certain degree, in other words, it's something that says, no.
This is everything
No.
according to studio.
No, I was here.
Oh,
Something else. I didn't.
No, it's like, I'm just throwing an idea, no, okay. I'm saying like some sort of like threshold thing, is that if you wanna manage a conversion, that it doesn't act as an incentive also to have an owner seek to vacate a building with large apartments in order to turn it into shared housing.
But what is there, does the dwelling unit factor apply to already built building?
It does,
Okay.
it does.
Yeah.
And also, I should just say, when you said conversions, I thought you meant.
Office conversions. Oh, no.
So, yeah, so I mean, in general, it would apply in both the situations, but, that's why I was answering.
To make things even more complicated, is there a possibility that some of the the market rate units, in these buildings that, can be converted to condominiums at a later date, like what's happening in New Jersey right now? And then that would change.
They can always be converted.
There's a process by
Yeah.
which, they can be converted, they have to go through the Attorney General's
Right.
office and the.
Well, let's say they're successful, how does that affect the affordable units in the, building? Is that factored in at all?
So if you are, I'm trying to think, just trying to think.
Let's say 8%.
So like, say you have
10% of the affordable.
And it's not
market rate.
homeownership.
Right.
At the beginning, it's rental units.
Right.
And they took advantage of the zoning to build a bigger building, right? They took advantage of UAP, let's say. And then years pass, and then the building is trying to convert from, say, rental to condo. My simplistic answer, and we can get a more detailed answer, would be that the permanent affordability would still apply. They'd have to figure out what to do, right? I don't.
It probably end up being a rental, 35 units in one rental condo unit, and the rest individual condo units.
Yeah, I mean.
Because the regulatory units are not allowed.
My concern is
What if
that
you
the
have-
affordable units stay affordable.
That is part of the state's, there's a law governing conversions, and there's a tenant protection plan that you have to submit when you go through the conversion process that specifically deals with rent stabilized units, these affordable units are rent
We
stabilized.
need to Paul.
Can I ask a question the other direction? This is great that we're talking about the maximum number of studios, but I still have concerns about super tall buildings that have few apartments. And by the elimination of the dwelling unit factor, is that going to have an impact such that place around the station or the western area of Hudson Yards, those
Great super lots.
we could have big buildings with few apartments and take up too much space without having habitability.
I think we're sort of maybe looking at sort of edge cases. I think in practice, probably not. I mean, were you gonna say something?
Well, we're an edge.
Oh, Joe, we are on the edge here.
We're on
That's what we do.
No, I'm gonna say,
But literally, we have the edge.
Very good.
Yeah, and just like in those examples, the density factors, they're never bumping into it because their units are just.
So much. Investing, how can it be managed?
How can that be managed?
How do you manage that crazy thing?
Super tall with.
So they're doing reforming everything. How about managing that?
I think I think that's a good thing. I know you've been asking about that.
Yes, we have.
So I think is part of this, like, we were trying to address the things when we saw like housing that was trying to be built was actually being blocked by the zoning.
This is housing that is not being built.
Yeah,
Because they take advantage of the crazy idea
Well,
of 4,000 square
I think
feet
in the
units.
context of this, I mean, we likely make a recommendation that you eliminate the dwelling unit factor, but rather you would adjust the dwelling unit factor.
Or apply it in a different way.
Apply it in a different way. And so I'm trying to understand how we can make a recommendation that we will allow for future units. And whereas in the South Clinton district, we have a requirement of 20% future bedrooms, maybe that formula could be applied to the dwelling unit factor citywide as opposed to just eliminating it. And at the same time, if we're talking about dwelling unit factor, let's address the other concern that we face of super talls with limited number of units.
So we're taking notes, obviously, and
Right,
we're
right.
recording it. But also, so let's again deal with the fact that the market, so I always say the market takes care of it. They do take care of it, trust me. So we have a 45-story building, okay, that's got 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms in it. And then as part of the dwelling unit factor being removed, I'm a great developer and I go, oh my God, I have all my market rate units here. My 41 unit is expiring and I can now take it was a 2-bedroom and make it a 3-bedroom shared unit, right? How do we deal with these kind of things, which, not the good owners, not the responsible, solid developers. It's always the ones on the edge. And now we have.
You were referencing related again. The edge building.
Actually wasn't, but I mean, there are folks who will, acquire an 80/20 that's expired out. And now it becomes many, many smaller units. How do we deal with that? Is that something do you think that should happen? Like, there's gotta be flexibility, this degree's about flexibility. I mean, we're not Elon Musk sitting here, right? Just saying.
I think it's a good question. I think.
I'm talking just total libertarian, whatever.
Whatever I
Okay.
want.
Yeah, that's what you meant, okay.
Yeah, I know,
What?
no, like, like the idea, whatever the market wants, let's figure it out, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But we don't live in the city, whatever the market wants, they get a lot, so we're trying to just manage it aside, which is zoning usage.
I think if you put that in writing, we can have our housing folks provide a more comprehensive response, but that's a really good question.
HPD too, because I think they read some here. Just the interactions.
The social issue too, I mean, it needs to be thought about. The vision, are we finished with the vision?
No,
Yeah.
there's more
That-
pages.
Let's.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay, we can go to the next slide.
No, she said 44.
We know it's a big one.
Yeah.
Got it,
Yeah,
Let's skip this.
Okay.
let's skip it, we know that.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is where we're gonna just go through, zoning changes for conversions. So,
Again, clarification of conversions, please, not commercial conversions, but residential.
No, this is all, this is residential.
Yeah.
Was actually talking about it before.
Non-residential to residential.
Just to
Okay.
clarify, when you say conversion, you're talking about adaptive reuse?
Yes.
Yeah.
Look, so we're not talking about just conversion in terms of usage, we're talking about the physical building.
Yes.
Is physically being converted. Okay, thank you.
okay, so in addition to the small and shared housing modifications, we're proposing these, zoning changes to enable more conversions. First, we'll change the eligible geography from business districts in Manhattan and limited areas of Queens and Brooklyn to the entire city. This will allow for conversion of buildings beyond just large offices, like schools or former religious buildings. Second, we'll allow for more recent buildings to have access to our adaptive reuse regulations.
Why couldn't schools be converted? They could be converted anyway. You can convert a school without any issue.
Usually, so the way that, why the special conversion rules work is anytime you hit like a zoning rule that doesn't, that you don't comply with if you're building like a residential building, you're usually stopped from doing that conversion. So take a school, just maybe as a good example. Usually you'll have you're given the ability to have a shallower rear yard than housing can. And so if you tried to convert that building, you would be told, well, you could do it if you shave off the back 10 feet of the building to have the complying 30-foot rear yard for housing. And so that became a huge problem for people. And so what the rules that are typically called in Article 1, Chapter 5, allowed buildings either 1961 or 1977 to convert without regard to those sort of slippages where you had to comply with this yard as opposed to that yard, or this court regulation as opposed to that court regulation, or FAR. It simply allowed you to convert that building without regards to those other rules. And so it's very beneficial in that way. It actually does make it possible, when someone converts an office building, say in Lower Manhattan, the only reason they're able to do it is because of those rules. Otherwise, they'd be stuck because those buildings do not comply with those.
Yes, we're used to seeing so many conversions that none of that was ever enforced whatsoever. We have a huge law conversion throughout Chelsea. I mean, that the idea that anyone would ever, that the Department of Buildings ever applied a rear yard requirement to law conversions in the West 20s or in the West 30s is sort of like, no, never happened. Like, nothing got shaved off. The buildings were either straight shot, heavy loft buildings in the West 20s or teens, or they were in the garment center and those were converted.
Are you talking two things? Are you like post 1980s?
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, that's because of these rules,
Right.
right? Because these rules said if you're building in a neighborhood or a district that like allowed housing and you had those
They
crazy
didn't allow housing,
situations.
it's all in districts.
So, okay, so then you're talking about some of the more.
I think Paul was in.
Yeah, sorry, Paul. I didn't take you.
Well, I just want to point out on that graphic that the current eligible geography is that darker shade. The lighter shade is pretty limited and it seems to be special planning district and garment district. Those are really the only two places where this change is going to impact.
What is the, so what is the, what governs that
This
now?
current, this is the current eligible
The
geography.
dark one, yeah.
Right, and then this, our proposed change, so it's this, then this is special planning district.
That's
Right.
This is that farther edge. Yeah.
What,
The Article 1, Chapter 5 rules already apply to most of the central business district, Midtown and Lower.
as a geography, not as an underlying zone.
if you allow housing in that area.
In
you
that
can
underlying
use
zoning,
that.
you can use it.
Right.
Yeah, I want to get parochial here, if you don't mind, but you want. So the Clinton Special District with churches or commercial buildings, garages, whatever. They could now have buildings going up that exceed.
No, conversion is conversion. So the building itself converting.
Buildings and churches, Joe.
It's-
A church could be converted to a residential building.
It can be converted today to a residential building.
Right, but now it could go higher.
No, nothing to height at all.
No, it would still apply,
We don't know that much yet.
yeah, that's.
So
Not that
the
long.
use is permitted, right? So like if they could figure out how to make the building comply with zoning rules for housing, like say it is a church that cut out courts, they do all sorts of stuff.
It could.
They can do that today, right?
No, it's not about height.
That's
It's
right.
about use. The St. Clair's Hospital converted into a residential building.
Residential.
They chopped out a core in the center. And as of right, it's old Sacred Heart School, the original one, it's not the current one, converted to housing. And they did it. So that could happen today. I'm just trying to understand what is the increase in the mapping, and I'm assuming that's between 8th and mid-block of 10th, right?
And it seems to also map specifically onto the R8 part of,
Right.
and
Which you
then
can do
also for
You
the.
can do the housing, but for whatever reason, then I mean, if we want to get into
Maybe
it.
just, why don't you just get back to us on this?
Sure.
I think part of it is, we're trying to understand it,
I'd like my question answered, if you don't mind.
but it's not about height here, it's about use, there's zero to do about height yet, we haven't gotten to that, we have to get to it.
Oh, okay.
That's why, no, it's only about use.
You should say they'll allow.
So for us in the cheat sheets, I just want to clarify,
Yeah,
this, the lighter purple areas indicate that these areas will now be allowed to convert to residential.
They'll be allowed to take advantage of the relaxed Article 1, Chapter 5 rules. Because today, you
What are
can,
those rules?
today, those are the relaxed residential conversion rules that Frank was talking about. Because today, if the underlying,
Your building, could convert.
My building could convert to residential.
If your building was in Clinton Special mid-block.
Yeah.
It could convert, yeah,
Right, okay.
and it wouldn't be able to.
Right.
Yeah, in general, like this doesn't have much of a big effect because housing's already allowed, buildings often in mid blocks and like Clinton are housing, right? So there's not there.
So in other words, when you were here for MSMX and we were saying, why did you not include the area between 8th and 9th Avenue? Here's that sort of inclusion.
Well, it's actually included in MSNX.
It's now, it's
it's a component of this proposal.
Yeah.
And we know we're hanging in there, but let's keep going, because there's things we want to ask, we haven't gotten to yet.
I can just finish up the points here if that's helpful.
No, go right ahead.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So the next proposal we're gonna talk about is just expanding the existing landmark transfer of development rights program. The landmark TDR program was created in the 1960s to relieve the financial burden on designated landmarks, which are subject to maintenance requirements and limited in their ability to redevelop or add new buildings to the lot. It would also allow landmarks to transfer development rights to more sites, including other zoning lots on the same block or as the landmark or immediately across the street from an intersection or a block.
So, yeah, so today, if you have a landmark, and you can only transfer your development rights to adjoining lots on that block and lots that are immediately across the street or catty corner. And so we're expanding that geography to include the entire block that that landmark is on and any lot that's across from a lot on that landmark block.
But still within whatever other zoning rules apply.
Right, right. You
It's
can't,
not,
you can't.
you can't just take it and make another pencil building.
Right.
And it can be across zoning districts.
If the receiving zoning district can
Because today,
Yeah,
no, because today you can't do that.
Today you can do it, but usually, so like you can do it by city planning commission special permit to a
Right.
pretty limited geography, right? So it's like, yeah, those opportunities, but what has been found over time is like they happen once, like in the,
So this becomes an as of right transfer, either within the zoning district or outside of the zoning district. And in a wider range geography.
that's right.
So I'm gonna try to bring this down to examples. So St. Luke's Church on West 46th Street sits in preservation area. If they have unused development rights, they could transfer them to the Excel site on the east side of 8th Avenue. That's the kind of thing.
Site doesn't need it.
Wow, exactly. But now I'm just saying in terms of a development site.
Right, but the receiving site still has to comply with the underlying
Yeah.
zoning, unless they seek a
Yes,
special permit or.
but I mean, this would be an as of right transaction. Okay. I know there must be rules about what that geography is somewhere in the text.
Yeah. And you still have to do the same things for the landmark, like having a maintenance plan and all. of
Yes.
this. So it's trying to make a good thing work out.
Okay, next.
Yeah.
Gotta keep on.
Next slide, please. Finally, the city wide text amendment would eliminate required parking minimums in new buildings citywide. As you guys know,
Supported this 14,000 times. We should go to the next one. I don't think we can say bravo, but I think we supported it, so we can move on.
great, next slide, please.
I'll celebrate later.
Yes. Oh, look, special districts, baby.
Yay.
Look, finally.
We're at the last topic, everyone.
Oh, do you mean the central one?
This is the most important.
Yeah.
Great.
3/4 on turf.
Jesus Christ.
Next slide. Okay, so as you all know here, New York City has a diverse array of special districts that have been enacted to further neighborhood planning goals. As a general approach, the current proposal carries through any relevant changes to the special district to ensure.
I guess honestly, you've got to be kidding.
Wait, Joe, let's let Abby keep talking.
I just want to say, we've been waiting for this, and seriously, you understand the underlying reason that 4.2 FAR came from. That was a back-end number to what a tenement covers on a lot. And since our majority of our buildings in the special zoning district preservation area are tenements, we would now go up.
How much new housing has been built in the preservation area recently?
Almost, how much piles of vacant lots have been filled in, as was the intent? Right? And how much new block, housing has been built? In our entire district, we have what's called a perimeter area, or we have a preservation area. And the new housing has been built in the high density surrounding districts, which is the underlying social and zoning compact for all these districts. So that's why we bring that to you. So
Sure.
Abby, please continue, because I cut you off to try to get to the heart of our discussion here. So, go ahead.
Okay, so the current proposals may be modified where the changes directly conflict with the special district's goals. As Joe just noted, we've got a CD4 specific example here. Many special districts, as you all know, have FARs that differ significantly from underlying zoning, like R8 portions of the special Clinton district. In those instances, the new UAP FAR would build on the special district FAR rather than simply eliminating it. A lot of special districts were written before there were analogous rules to the underlying districts, like lot coverage. So the goal is to eliminate redundant text in the special district and align with the broader underlying district rules to create a more consistent framework. In some instances, the rules for the underlying district will be different from the older special district rules. So in this example here, with the special Clinton district, an R8 would get currently a market rate FAR of 4.2. Rather than going to a full UAP FAR of 7.2 in the overall underlying district, this area would now get a 20% bump to 5.04 for affordable and supportive housing.
On to spontaneity again. Specious question. How much housing has been preserved in the preservation area of the special zoning district? Thousands of apartments that would have been removed and demolished and were erased without these provisions in place. And if anything that has been built new, it's been built in a way that fits in and reinforces the residential character of the district. And that's real. And the zoning, our zoning is over decades of figuring things out. And because we have areas that remain low density, we as a community embrace other areas that have high density. And that's the political and social compact that we've developed. So we're going to ask you as we go through this to understand we're not against density. It's where it ends and lands. And this is a district, this is a community that has sites that are FARs of 33. And that was an exchange. It is FARs of 33 that were in exchange for keeping other areas low, back, forth, sideways, and figuring out what to do. That's all I'm saying. It's a range. So we're with you on an idea of sharing. But it doesn't mean sharing that we forget the history and we dismantle everything that we've dealt with since 1973 in this case. So, I mean, really, it's like the idea back in that period of time was that the private market wanted to demolish this district in order to extend the central business district west. And the compact was struck, preserve this section, but allow high density to grow. And we have excelled in the city. I mean, remember the name called Lisa Machete, former commissioner of HPD? We were the first 80-20 built, the Oreo building on 42nd Street. We said, yes, it's a high rise, that's fine, build it before class. So
I think I need the next one. I'm sorry for waiting.
No, this is just a substantive question. When is it for height purposes, like height and other bulk restrictions? How will they interact with this? Could you explain a little more about that?
We're gonna hit the next slide. Next slide, please. Sorry, it's gonna be the slide. Got a lot of slides to get to. Okay. Okay, we're gonna skip it, but I think the overall idea is what we were just talking about, where, we're trying to bring regulations to be consistent with underlying zoning districts. Next slide, which I think is what we really wanted to get to. Okay, so again, this is a lot of information. I apologize for the small size of the text. You'll have a copy of this to go through at a later time in more detail. Okay, so we want to align, we want to increase FAR for UAP buildings in the special Clinton district from 4.2 to 5.04, like we were just saying. And then building heights would be within 100 feet of the wide street, going from 55 to 66 base, to being.
So I think, you know, Joe, your point's well taken. We respect the community board's position that, you know, you've worked really hard on these districts. You've lived here for a long time. You understand this community really well. We respect that position. I think that's why, you know, our intention here was really to thread the needle between respecting all the work that's gone into these special districts, but also respecting the intent of the universal part of universal affordability preference and making sure that it does apply citywide, that, you know, all neighborhoods, regardless of where they are in the city, can contribute to additional housing production and not necessarily singling out one single neighborhood or one single borough for special treatment. So that was our goal here. Let's make it universal, but also where there are special rules and where there need to be lower FARs, let's respect the framework that's already been put in place.
I think the problem is for me and for the communities, we've gone for 50 years thinking the height limit is 66 feet on the side streets. Suddenly, as I understand it, that's gone. You want to change it. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, you need to tell the community that, not just the people here. That is a huge, and it's not just the special district, it's also parts of Chelsea, I would assume.
Parts of Chelsea, it is part of Hudson Yards. I think the thing that.
This is a shock. I mean, we have worked for 50 years and suddenly, we're gonna throw that out.
No, and I think the bigger part is that it's as if the city didn't exist prior to this. This district, the Department of City Planning in multiple incarnations, and I say this to my members on the committee here who are coming from a different point of view, it worked to bring density, and with density, affordable housing for decades, right? And it's always been a compact. We're gonna do it here, but we're gonna preserve it here. Do it here, preserve it there. And to say that we need to be brought in line universally, we were ahead of this curve before this walked in, or the homeowner neighborhoods across the city are not being upzoned here, okay?
They are.
Staten Island, to be fair.
They are.
No, no, come on now. Staten Island is not going to a medium density in portion because the politics are totally against it. And those council members, you know, you never get to the city council, okay? Reality, right? Parts of Queens you're adding in ADUs, you are not adding in homeowner neighborhoods, huge upzones, because it would never politically fly. So we're fine, because we're in this medium density and high density area, right? But we have worked with the department and with the commission for so many years to strike a balance. And the idea is that balance is being struck and respecting things that were agreed to as part of a city government and the continuity of government don't matter anymore because we're going to be universal. My answer is we should be universal, figure out how to manage things through. When you get some of these core values in these special zoning districts, I didn't sit in rooms like this and negotiate West Chelsea, literally sub-district by sub-district, and corral all the folks in Chelsea. It was not easy to get to an agreement to save the High Line, do increased FAR, change zoning, and carefully calibrate sub-districts A through F, whatever the hell it is down there, right? We did that because we work with the city. And to say that now, okay, none of that really matters because you have to do your fair share. Our fair share has been done over and over.
And we continue to do it.
And we continue to do it.
Are the historic districts immune from this?
Yeah.
Historic districts have to, just like they do today, anybody would have to go to LPC for approval of whatever.
They're carved
Paul
out.
has his hand.
Yeah, I mean, that was the issue I was gonna raise, is that we're talking about universality, but there are exceptions, there are carve-outs. And so what I think we're saying is this Clinton special district is because I can understand special districts, there are a lot of them. Hudson Yards Special District is very different from Clinton Special District, right?
But I think mid-block,
Right, what we're saying here is perhaps the West Chelsea Special District and the Special Clinton District could be carved out, much like the historic districts are carved out, so that the universality can apply, but like everything, there are exceptions, and we're saying we should be an exception.
I just just to be on the historic districts answer, like, if you're in a historic district and you have an FAR, you would have the ability to get a higher FAR for affordable housing. You get a
20%.
higher, yeah, I mean, depending on the zoning district. You'd have to get that approved by LPC, just like you have to get anything approved by LPC. But like, it isn't as if the zoning is saying, well, those things don't apply in a historic district.
Frank, when we worked on Hudson Yards, we were given a task. You must come up with like 20 million square feet, whatever the hell it was. And we worked to among the sub districts, move square footage around to hit the target the city requested to make sure we preserved a certain section.
Sure.
At a lower density. And we did that, and in those other districts, those produced more housing units because we went from FAR to 5 or 2 to 10 bonusable to 12 or 18, right? So we did this exercise to balance through. And the idea that it doesn't really matter. It feels like I'm with the Western rail yards discussion, that we can have an entire points of agreement. And because quote, times have changed, you throw out that and it doesn't matter.
I think what this is trying to do is, as I think what Abby tried to say, or did say, was starting with the FARs that are there, right? The 4.2.
You're trying to offer a branch.
Sorry?
You're trying to offer a branch to say, we're meeting somewhere in the middle. Use the phrase thread the needle. There are certain things that are not really needle threading.
I think you should tell us why that's true, right? The commission and the council are gonna hear that from a lot of people
So,
about a lot of different
You wanna
things.
hear why it's true? This is a community that finds a way to bring more affordable housing whenever we can.
Yeah.
It's also an area that's economically viable for developers to go ahead and develop here and to bring all sorts of types of housing here. It makes no sense to say, we need to make it universal because we need to be fair. We've been carrying the load. You can easily say, special districts do not apply here. Why? Because one, they already have produced affordable housing, they've already preserved affordable housing, and they will continue to produce affordable housing. There is no reason to say that you have to throw out every single bit of the character of the community. And what I am seeing in this entire preservation is a future of construction. I just see construction, because there will be all types of housing stock, conversions as well, that will take advantage of the opportunity to produce this additional housing that may not necessarily. No, I know, the problem is focused on affordable, but again.
It's not
This is
that effect.
Yeah, it does not necessarily bring, like, you're telling me, you gave me an example, where you said, okay, it's gonna bring 12 more units. But you add them all up, but you don't necessarily create affordability in a community when you have construction. When you build new, when you make those changes, you might make a rent affordable, but you don't make the community affordable. The key that we've been able to do in our preservation is keeping it affordable for families across generations. Because we haven't had all the construction. We've had people stop tearing down buildings.
I guess as a question, I mean, this is the thing, like, when we look at this and we say the market rate FAR is 4.2, we will give a higher FAR for affordable housing. That's gonna be a 60% AMI, permanently affordable. That doesn't, at first blush, to me at least, sound like a big market opportunity, right? Because you're still going to have that, you're providing, you're not getting any more market rate housing out of that. You're just providing affordable housing, which usually is subsidized by like tax policy and other things anyway. So I
own 3 tenements on West 48th Street.
Sure.
I have bought those tenements at an inflated price. I really would like to figure out a way to get out my tenants. I do it very carefully so I don't go up to the harassment level, right? Well, actually, let's take a building for West 45th Street, just have this, right? So that is a trouble building, whatever. It's gonna go to a social service organization, 4 buildings. The tenants just arrived here today talking about this briefly. And now I can take those 4 buildings, convert that to one multiple dwelling. I have a bump of 0.8 FAR. I pull them all together And yes, I'm gonna provide some affordable housing,
Some,
but I have a
all
greater
of the
incentive.
addition is affordable housing in that instance,
Right,
right? Just to be clear.
Of course, well, it's not the addition, I've now vacated my buildings, so many.
The additional FAR.
Yes, it's just, yeah, right,
Okay.
right. The bottom line is, it's an incentive. What we saw, Frank, in the Garment Center District, with the scattered tenements and the illegal demolition, was the incentive was the buildings were like a 5 FAR, and the new FAR was 13. So
Yeah.
there was an overwhelming desire to figure out a way to vacate buildings and to do stuff like this. But here's the broader thing.
Okay.
The deal, we made a deal. These are all deals that were made to say, don't demolish this, build a huge corridor. How many communities in the 1980s said, please build 45-story buildings along an avenue? And said, please do it. You know, like, you gotta, like, we've been on a road together. That's the part that I don't get.
So I'd like to, you know, you use terms like thread the needle and all of this, and you say historic districts will have to go through an LPC special approval in order to do any of these changes. So let's thread the needle here and say, let's put some special conditions on the special districts that there would have to be additional approvals to do anything like this. And they have to come to the community. I mean, like, you say to us, we need to thread the needle for you. We're saying to you, what solutions can we offer that you can say, yeah, we can support this to thread the needle to protect Clinton Special District, West Chelsea Special District? Because when the MTA site was being redeveloped, we were under extreme pressure to raise the height there to get more units. And we stood firm and said, no, we're not raising the height. And so now you're saying to us, we're gonna have a zoning classification that's gonna raise the height. And we have fought against that over and over and over again, even for affordable housing, right? That was a affordable housing site, and we said, we're not going to go above the height restrictions there. Now you're coming to us and saying, well, now it's gonna be affordable housing, we're gonna eliminate the height restriction. So we're asking you, how can we find this? What is the solution you can help us find to protect this 50-year program?
Nicely said, Paul.
Just a point of information, so how many total slides do you have to get through today?
So the rest of the deck is basically like this for all the other special districts, but the basic content is the same, just showing.
He was giving us this,
This is how, if you're not saying I'm changing special districts, you're saying this would be the impact if the change happened, right?
Right.
No, they're changing the text to allow it.
It has to be approved by the city planning commission and the city council.
Well, of course, it's the Europe, I'm saying, but
So this would be the change in the.
that didn't change text here. They were not,
So if we could just say, don't change that one.
Roberta, please.
So this is, I appreciate their, like, a lot of really long time advocates, of the Clinton Special District in particular on this committee. I think, like, I think the members of DCP, the presenters are aware, I am aware. I am not a long time resident, nor do I have like the years alive context to allow me to understand quite, everything that has been fought for.
Years alive.
Yeah.
That's great. I didn't get that at first at all.
Nice way of saying the world.
People were great. So I am hearing a bunch of different things kind of together from Joe and Judy and Paul and Dolores, that there are concerns about hard fought things within the special district. And what I am trying to understand is, like, in my mind, the core of that is the displacement of tenants. But it sounds like there may be other things that are less tangible and some of which may be aesthetic in nature. I was wondering, and I don't know if it's
No, you're-
crosstalk,
no,
but I'd like to.
You're dead right, because one of the things
Sort of
that,
like,
so,
sort of unpack that.
I suggest you come to a block meeting, any one of block meetings, because it's not just me or Joe or Dolores. We, I think, are channeling a great number of people, not only in the special district in Hell's Kitchen, but I think Chelsea as well, who might be concerned. So come and meet.
so.
I don't mean that.
No,
in any way to
right,
dismiss
but
block
can I
association.
give you, I think what you're probing for, right? So we saw something recently, another illegal demolition, and you'll appreciate this, right? 435 West 48th Street, right? And again, oh no, we're just doing this renovation. And the renovation now consists of an entirely new steel and concrete structure. So we know it's not a renovation, the building is literally gone, right? But as part of it, Roberta, at the end, they removed the entire facade. So what is happening here is that there is a lack of continuity because the preservation area has meant that there's a favoring for renovation and addition over entire demolition. And so we've seen in these weird cases where owners are taking this piece, that piece, even though the special zoning district says you can't, more than 20% removal and replacement. So really what I would say is this scenario means that the buildings on 45th Street would not have been preserved, that an owner would have bought them, got the remaining tenants down not to 11, but to 6 or 5, right? And then take that, rip everything off, new multiple dwelling, nice glassy, which you see all over West Chelsea. And that accelerates the pace of change for everything else. I think what we're talking about here, the district has done, it's managed the pace of change. So there has not been just a wholesale removal of the people who live here. And we're saying to you is, because our board has been so savvy, we don't get to be penalized in this goal, okay? Because Amanda Burden, as the chair of the City Planning Commission, being totally pissed off that Gotham sucked up development rights and built in the coal on 54th by going down the block almost 10th, and there was no height limit on 9th Avenue, that she imposed as an action through Hudson Yards rezoning, a height limit on 10th Avenue and 9th Avenue that gave us something that is going to be higher, but it's not going to be so high. And here, none of that matters. None of your own history as a department matters, and you're going to just change it. There's got to be a way to talk about how we can work through this. And by the way, too, I want to say, because you guys have been working this a while now, we do appreciate your attempt to thread the needle. The problem is it's the wrong needle. And we need to work through this to figure it out. Are there other areas of our district? Sorry, I'm sorry, Kate, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I had a couple questions, but actually, I wanted to say like, thank you, because this is something that we in this district have been focused on for years. And to have the city now saying like, my God, this is important and we have to have more affordable housing everywhere, I think is awesome. I can't imagine, I mean, I think you're gonna obviously be getting the same pushback at every single community board meeting you go to.
Yes.
Everybody is gonna tell you, this is totally changing the character of our neighborhood, and this is unfair for all these reasons, and this is why we should have one more exception, right? So like, I can only imagine what your lives are gonna be like in like 60 days. But at the same time, because we have the history here in the district, I think, we all know why we feel so careful about this. I do think it's really important that we're careful with our language and what we're understanding. You're not asking us to throw out our special districts. You're saying that this is an extra 20% that's applying on top of it. So we're not talking about going from 5 FAR to 13 FAR ever, right? That this, what you're saying is, this would be whatever we've negotiated in the past, like in any other district in the city. You may now have the opportunity, or developers can now apply for an extra 20%.
For permanently
affordable housing, exactly. And listen, I have been involved in other areas and I know that developers are like, never mind, yeah, they're not all so motivated by permanently affordable. So I get that you have a different perspective than some of the people who worked with developers on not just permanently affordable housing. But to Paul's point, and I think it's something that this is my question, is that I know you can't, and it would completely defeat the purpose if there are a zillion exceptions everywhere, because everybody feels like we have a reason to have an exception. But I think what would be really helpful, because I think it's always the devil's in the details, is where can we, can there be a universal rule that is developed that says for each community district, that has special districts, if you don't want the 20% to apply to this district, you can have a different rule.
This part of a district.
Yeah, this part of the district, then you can have it apply, you know what I mean? Like, is there a way we can think about, like, the goal is 20% more affordable housing in your community district. But you, as the informed members of the community board, get to help develop how that will be applied.
I can see
Right.
Frank's wheels turning over there.
It's a great question. And I mean, one of the, I really do say this, like, one of the reasons we have public review is to like hear comments both about like what's the proposal, what it's trying to do, and like, are there better ways of doing it? There've definitely been situations where better ways have come out of the process.
So I bring us back, Katie's, this is the crux of the idea, right? I don't want to hear it's a great question. Because that's the same thing, and I say this in general. It's no more great questions. We want to figure out how we work in partnership with you.
Yeah,
To actually
this is a
achieve
great
it.
goal.
So like, for example, our board is on record so long now, with Devin, we have said we want to liberate the 11th Avenue corridor in Hudson Yards from the commercial constraints. Well, if we look at this in total in our district, wow, would that bring a lot of affordable units in, because the densities there are so amazing to begin with. And that's an area that we've talked about that we would even consider accepting the new densities, in residential densities. If we look at this holistically as a community, like we've done so many years and years at a clip, and say, like, you must have some metric as to what the production is for all these changes, right?
So
Approximately, I'm not saying
the
perfect.
environmental analysis, this is really different from sort of like a neighborhood-wide rezoning,
Right.
where you have to do a really
Yeah, not
in-depth
in-depth.
analysis of what the outcome is gonna be for that specific area.
Mhm.
Obviously, that would have been really impossible to do
Mhm.
for every part of the city. So we sort of looked at representative neighborhoods, and what we found for CD4 is that over the next 15 years, the likely outcome in terms of housing production was between 0.5 and 1 housing unit per acre.
Okay, so that was that total? I'm just saying, I
It's
don't work
it's
in the city, I don't work on acre basis.
So let's say,
Ooh-wee.
I think that sounds good. I mean, we're moving, I guess, to note that.
That would work instead.
There, we sort of
Yeah.
broke out in the environmental, sort of that housing production and put it into like 4 different buckets, depending on, like, sort of that increment. And CD4 was in the second to bottom of 4 buckets, so like.
Have you seen our affordable housing plan and how much we've already produced?
Wait, I'm sorry, can you say what you just said again?
I'm sorry, I said, I was
This is where the bottom.
Yeah, but the.
Production?
I didn't understand.
Projected.
Oh, so no, that's actually works in my favor, Katie.
Yeah,
No, it means that there's not that much to make up.
right. I think you're saying that,
Right.
yeah, we would have a lower amount of new.
Compared to the rest.
Uh-huh.
Because
And
we're
everybody else has more to catch up because we've already.
Because we've
done
been,
that. So
yeah,
that's
yeah, right,
Yeah.
that's good for us, right, so.
Right.
The thought then is, if we try to look at this and say, where can we figure out a way to get that production to happen, right? Which we've come up with over and over and over again. Whether it's in this current version of this action or a subsequent action. That's something that we would embrace because it ties into our entire history as the Chelsea and Health Kitchen neighborhoods. It ties into it, saying, oh, this is good, right? I mean, imagine you liberate 11th Avenue site with the developer who's actually real bankable, like a TF Warner or something like that. But they're doing this stuff and say now it can be a 15 FAR residential. And 20% of that, or 25%, because we mapped as MIH in that thing, right? Is gonna produce a pantload of units more than this little increment across every tenement on West 47, 48, and 49 streets.
Jeffrey's mentioned.
Just
Katie's idea about quotas, I think, is definitely a worthy one. And
Quotas is such a bad word.
it is a bad.
Goals. Production goals, production.
And, I don't know if that will targets, I don't know if that was a concept that was explored earlier in this process, but we can definitely get you, if that was explored, we can get you an answer. Why,
Because in your
if it
reports,
was looked at and why it was.
right, but
not
let's say, if it was dismissed, who cares? I'm asking you to say that in your reports that you produce every single year about housing production, I think it's 4 years in a row, we have the highest number of housing units in CD4. That always shocks me because of all the rezoning we do.
That's
So
right.
like we have this production. So don't say if you have the production they're already produced. Let's figure out how to make the production just a more managed way, not to undermine the broader community goals. Because you're right about asking that question. You got to it. It's the broader change that happens that then changes further things, and that accelerates. The private sector does not like our kind of district or Chelsea. They want to take, they don't. They like it, but they for different reasons. Yes, okay.
Just a couple of things, I was gonna wait till the end, but it doesn't look like we're gonna get there, so,
Why don't we try to, because I also have some stuff in addition.
I guess the question is, are we gonna allow the presenters to get through this slide?
We're basically done.
It's already done.
Okay,
It's more this very.
okay, so just a couple of things, we've talked a lot about permanent affordability. What is the expectation for market rate production? Because one of the things that I think is devoid of our conversation tonight is the fact that at the end of the day, an increase in supply will reduce pressure on stabilized tenants. It will reduce pressure universally on the idea of preservation to a certain extent. A significant increase in supply will reduce pressure on sort of the cycling through of lower paying tenants or cleaning your building. So what analysis has been done on market rate and how that will affect things? Because we haven't talked about the fact that our market rate apartments in this neighborhood are $5,000 and $6,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. And so as much as we create affordable housing, which is critical and the linchpin to this community's existence and has been for a very long time, I think we would be doing a wider disservice to the city to not acknowledge and question whether or not the market rate units that will be created will actually affect and drop the market rate price of an apartment.
Well, they're based upon the market.
I would appreciate if to find out if city planning has studied that.
Happy for you.
I didn't hear a question, I'm sorry.
As a part of this citywide undertaking, has any consideration for how this increase in supply generally will affect the market rate cost of units?
I didn't get back to you on that.
Okay.
I don't have your answer on top. Okay, that's a really good question. And I will say that there are certain aspects of this really broad comprehensive proposal that's more focused on market rate development, like the ADU proposal, for example. It doesn't necessarily apply to CD4, but that's something that won't necessarily have affordability attached, but it is contributing to the overall supply. So,
got it. I just wanted to sort of throw the supply in the mix because I've recognized that for us, that's always a secondary or tertiary conversation, and that's okay. But I want to make sure the city planning is studying it. And just a couple other things. First of all, I should have started with saying thank you guys. We heard that we appreciate this, but thank you also. This is a significant undertaking. And so regardless of what you hear and feel at the end of the day, kudos for all the significant work that we put into this. And I guess like it's something else, is any analysis done as it relates to how many units of housing in CD4 or across the districts are currently exist today that were built prior to 1961? And how many units have been built post 61?
we haven't done that level of analysis as part of this proposal, but we definitely have those numbers.
Yeah, I guess I just think it's notable for us to think about the fact that I would place a significant bet on the fact that the majority of us probably live in a unit built before 1961, when housing production was significant, abundant, and therefore prices were very cheap. And so we should think about the struggles of, yes, there will be construction, my neighbor, yes, Dolores, there certainly will be. And I appreciate all of your reactions to what me saying has to do with the fact that a lot of time has gone by since 1961 and since 1973, and even since 2005 when we did Hudson Yards and West Chelsea. And we have to recognize that things are different.
We have the highest degree of housing production of any board in the city, Jeffrey, and
you know what?
And to do
What
that,
I'm
it's
excited
not
about,
based upon
what I hope
actual
we
facts.
What I hope we hold pride in is that we continue to be that board and that we also are able to push the city to do more as well.
Right.
So I am excited by the potential changes, while this will not be adopted post-sale. I am excited and eager that we are finally actually thinking about production and pushing us into an abundant city of people in the 21st century. So I hope we'll consider that as we think about the fact that fossilizing the community is actually to its detriment, and we've lost units in Chelsea. In 2 weeks, we're gonna get a presentation about 2 townhouses that are gonna get combined from 4 units of housing into 1. They're adding height, and it's gonna be for 1 family, going from 4 units of housing. We're seeing that happen across the city.
Take Travis.
So we really have to think about that in the wider context.
Travis and Didi.
My
Thank you,
building,
everybody.
The inverse of this
And
concern,
Rachel.
the inverse of that concern is you're presupposing that adding more inventory would drive the market rates down. Historically, in the United States, how gentrification works
Sure.
is that once you present more high income housing, more people that can afford those move in and push out people that live in that neighborhood and compose that community. And so that was the concern that I think I heard expressed here. Also, you referenced 1961, there are global factors that were occurring in the United States that made housing cheaper then. And so you can't apply that to this current market with this current interest rate. Just do some context there.
Go to JD, then Rachel, and then Ryan.
I just want, Jeffrey, my building was built in before 1860, okay?
Oh. Good. That's a good thing.
I'll say number one.
Rachel.
Okay, so our goal today is to come up with a framework, list of suggestions perhaps for the June meeting, right? So I'm gonna frame this in terms of a suggestion, if I can. Also echoing Jeffrey and Katie, thank you for doing this. Also for making it eye level. We're trying to make it eye level. It's a dense topic, and also trying to cater to our special district, because there are many presentations where it's just like uniform to all the districts. So appreciate you trying to put an effort to cater this to some people. My question is, I think we heard a lot about kind of the unintended consequences, the loopholes today, and that brings me to thinking the developers, right? And I get that this might not be a question that you guys can answer, but can we be proactive and maybe in terms of an analysis or identifying possible loopholes and being proactive about potential ways developers can come in and take advantage of those loopholes, the cracks in the rules or the new plans that you're proposing? That's just something that I heard a lot in, sitting in housing and our full board meetings about the kind of not the great developers, the responsible ones, but the ones that will be actually putting tools to action and, will be relying on these, rules. So just wanted to put that into your consideration.
Yeah, I mean, well taken. Always with, I don't want to say always, but when you try and do something this comprehensive, where you're touching like almost every page of the zoning resolution, there might be unintended consequences. And I think trying to identify, like, this process is like sort of the reason why it exists, is to sort of identify those potential loopholes, but almost by definition, a loophole sort of like manifests itself like after the fact. After
They have
everyone-
very heavy, highly paid attorneys, that's why.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do our best and we rely on everyone around this table and communities to try and help us during this process, because like Frank will say, be the first one to say it, like, we don't get it right on the first try. Like, we rely on help from other eyes, from other people to try and make this a better product, so.
Paul, this is I don't think we presented on any of this yet, and I've read through a lot of the language, and it's the classification of the R11, R11A, and R12. Okay, so within the zoning language change in the edits, I did Control F R12 and searched everything, but there's no place where you actually describe what an R11, R11A, and R12 description would entail. You put in bulk and height and all those connected places, so there's room. And I know it's not being mapped right now, but we as a community board spent 3 years studying 12 FAR cap removals and what we would propose. And our committee very clearly decided not to create R11, R12 zones, but instead institute a special permit process. And now I'm seeing a structure for an R11, R12 zone, which we as a board have already not supported. And it's in here, so I wanted to find a way that we could better understand what the proposal is for the R11 or 12. And whether or not a special permit consideration would be given that was the conclusion we reached. And I did see in the R12, it was up to 18 FAR, which many of us support the additional density, and we've supported additional density in Hudson Yards. So this is not a stop R11 or 12, but it's moving, it's a train, and we want to figure out how to best address our concerns with that.
Yeah, I have a question for you. What would a special permit do that a Euler zoning map amendment couldn't accomplish? Because in order to map these, it would still have to go through the process, come to you.
A series of findings that talk about why it makes sense for that location.
And it's location by location, not large,
Not already
not
checked,
blocks,
yeah.
not districts. It would be each specific site would have to go through and have citations on what would or would not be allowed on that particular site.
I think when we make it, as a starting point, like when we, all the other 100+ zoning districts we have, they get mapped, council, commission has to approve it. That's our sort of starting point. So we just created these districts as so we'd have that. There are special districts, so you have, I think you said 4 acres. And it is most of the district is special district. So you can imagine if there's something that like one wanted to tailor the locations of what an R11 or an R12 could do. Yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of conversations that would happen when someone was trying to like map it. So to me, it's sort of like, it's like the vanilla starting point. But inevitably that conversation is gonna have a lot of other aspects to it, like whether it be an individual site or a neighborhood scale thing. And I think that will still be able to happen.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of the areas west of 11th here, where we have potential for higher density housing. We would want all of the area west of 11 zoned R11 or R12.
Sure.
Right, top of the river. You know, we want very precise, and it ties back to our conversation about the special Clinton district, and that, you know, it's very nuanced and the work we've done for decades on this, that we would want to have an area mapped R12 that then developers come in after to build whatever they want within that new zone classification.
In other words, the idea that we're constantly having the development community lead the charge, have a new tool, why not talk about it as to where it makes sense to map it, and therefore you're managing that development, you're doing the planning part of the city planning thing, which I say all the time, like, you're not city development, you're city planning, right?
Sure, and I think what this process is doing is a large thing of planning.
It is.
Doesn't mean that there's like no other future planning, right? And like, if say, you guys said 11th, so listen, if you or city planning, everybody came to work together on 11th Avenue, you may decide there are some places where R11 or R12 made sense, and you may say other places, it's like, no, that's
Correct.
not right. That can happen, right? Like, just like Clinton and West Chelsea, and Hudson Yards, they have different areas where like densities like this, or this, something's like
This
this.
is all about balance.
Frank, you know, our reaction to that though, is
Yeah.
sitting here listening to this, that, oh, we can make those changes in the future, when we have a special Clinton district that's 50 years old that we're now tossing aside. We have Western Rail Areas agreements that are being tossed aside. So this notion that we can then protect these things in the future, that is.
I guess all I'm saying is that like, having something, you know, we have 100 other zoning districts in the zone, having it in the zoning doesn't mean that is just existence. It doesn't mean that it's actually on the map, and that entire conversation still has to happen. That's all.
Okay, then we, within the housing opportunity framework, then perhaps we can include some more language that would protect the R12, R11 zones and protect our neighborhood at the same time.
Or direct, it's sort of like, I think it's almost like, we have special zoning districts for a reason, because we can put more text in it to do something, right? That's why they exist. Frank,
No, I'm joking.
you're one of the biggest writer of it, so
I-
please.
No.
Okay, so before I go to Brian, just one very specific question. We are gonna change the voluntary inclusionary housing, confirm with NIH, the various options. But we have in Hudson Yards and in parts of something special, the ability to also get inclusionary for moderate and middle income. Is that staying or going?
As proposed, it would go as part of the voluntary program.
See, look at this.
You're getting rid of moderate and middle?
Yes, again, one of the key things we negotiated was to have a range of incomes, because our community is not just the lowest, and you're not hearing the universal, the city is not a universe. That was such a, not even a hard fought thing, it was considered to be a huge community compromise.
We're
To have a
actually-
range of incomes.
We're actually taking the ideas and the framework from these sort of earlier inclusionary housing areas like Special
Right.
Plan, Western Sub Area C2. And applying it citywide because we recognized that we didn't want to have all of those units at 80% AMI. So now with income averaging, which UAP is introducing, you could have some units at 90, 100% of AMI.
But we specifically tailored, have units at 100, 125, and 165 to reach the two household incomes of the civil servants, the folks who are above all the inclusionary. Do not think that you can say to us that from my housing side, all anybody cares about in the affordable housing world is the lowest income, right? I know that all across the city, people cannot afford the mortgage. And they are not eligible for the lower income. They're above the 80%. That, the projects I'm talking about, that project on 53rd Street, 103 units, moderate and middle, 53,000 applications. And it is full of civil servants, all kinds of people. I mean, it is teachers, airline folks, people, sanitation, like they're every part of the service, and they're two-income households. We fought to always have a mix of incomes. In the preamble for the special zoning district, it says, Clinton Special, it says for a range of incomes. That was thought about then. We never were able to achieve it until we got Hudson Yards. And now you can get an inclusionary for 50, 660, 80, 100, 125, and 165. And to say that that doesn't really matter, it doesn't matter maybe citywide, but it matters here.
I think that's a comment and a potential change to UAP that the commission would be interested in hearing from you.
Okay, because it was a really central thing to hold on to a broad range of households. Yes.
This is a question relating to that. So in addition to the comment, a thing that I've sort of struggled with, when the community is very in favor of, particularly middle income, so you're above 100% of area median income, the overall state and then city policy conversation is moving lower. And so what can be subsidized legally is just moving lower and lower. So
Right.
what I'm
It's a reaction.
trying to better understand is how to feasibly enforce or how to feasibly, finance this housing when ultimately your underlying subsidy isn't.
There was no subsidy.
It's the moderate, but
There was no
it's not
no.
against the middle.
No subsidy. That's what happens. There is no subsidy. So in, let's say, the Gotham building on, where the Covenant's located, right? They did units at 125%, right? And there was no subsidy for that. They did it because the regulation was there and enabled them just to get the additional bump, right? Right. So it's that sort of thing. There is no subsidy in any of that. Certain units are not gonna be, they're not gonna be, with Katie Trucks means capital subsidy, meaning financing from citizens. Oh my God.
Sorry,
No,
we're used to it.
well, I haven't done it in a long time. So we're used to. I mean, those programs are not really accessed, but they get, the units get reduced, because the thing of it is, as Jeffrey spoke, our two-bedroom units are starting at $6,000. And people on the two income, the middle income, can't afford $6,000. They can afford $3,500, they can afford $4,000, but they can't afford $6,000, and for a three bedroom, $8,000, $9,000. I mean, so we have to figure out how do we, the market's not producing for those folks. No matter how much supply we create, it's not gonna push it down. How do we give them a lifeline, even though it's not a lot? It's a lifeline.
So more of a question, I meant that, yes, the question, more of a question, perhaps you could, in the things that we asked, DCP and the HPD to explain just how, will this mechanically work?
That's a good point. And just as a quick follow-up to that, I thought that one of the slides said that the special district rules remain in place and just the 20% thing is laid on top. So I guess I don't understand why, like how.
They don't, they get changed.
Well, apparently, but I feel like the word said one thing and what you're saying now is different.
To make a change in a special district, you have to edit the text in the special district. That's just the way that.
Right.
So like what I think Abby was saying is, the special district remains in place. Clinton has 4.2 in preservation, has different heights in preservation. And the question is, how do you make UAP work? And so the text goes in and tries to make UAP work in all of the different places.
Right.
So that's when I think that's what she was trying to say. Like,
It changes the numbers.
it creates a second set of numbers for.
Just adding 20%. But I guess that what I don't understand is, so then why do the AMI rules disappear?
Because all of the rules.
Wouldn't it just be 20% of them?
So all of the rules so there are different areas in Clinton today and other parts too that have like different
ranges.
voluntary inclusionary housing programs that sort of set aside different ones of like C2 versus other area versus all. And the idea is that like, rather than having all of these different ones, there would be one set of rules that would apply. So all affordable housing that would get a higher FAR would be subject to these rules over here. And that's when Eddie was talking about the 60% as the average for thing. So it's changing rules to connect to that would be the program.
No, Katie has a good question. I still don't understand. So the Clinton Special District rules apply until they don't apply. Is that what you're saying?
Like every place when someone does a text amendment, right? You all see people come to do projects. And usually sometimes, and for you all, it's usually a lot of the times, just because there are so many special districts, right? Someone has to go in and edit the text to like make their project happen. They may create a new sub area or they change a height in a thing or something. So that's what this does. It changes lots of different rules in your special districts and the 60 other special districts.
So a building can come and say, I want to build higher, affordable, and they can do that. So they can go to 80 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
As proposed, and
That's currently.
Yeah, as currently proposed, and someone said it before, it's like, if approved by the city planning commission in that exact state, and then approved by the city council in that exact state, yes, that would be possible.
So
But that's why
the
we're having
entire
a whole
Clinton
conversation.
district, that could happen all over the place.
That is.
That is the current proposal.
Okay.
So, by the way, just to note, we don't live in a fossilized anything, because if our district has been nothing but dynamic since the moment I moved in, a long time ago, it is constantly changing. Yeah, trying and then pull.
First, just a question, on our procedure as a board. I know we're having this conversation here tonight. I'm assuming we're gonna have amongst ourselves fairly in-depth one at, both land use committees. So is that correct?
Yeah, the land use committees are gonna report, so because this weird schedule we're on, right?
Right.
We're talking tonight, by the way, anything we'll be able to summarize what we said tonight, because it's just.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to look at the video and like. Send out a bulleted list, because by the way, and also, yes, thank you, because we're a tough.
That was just a short question. The answer is yes.
But yes, so in terms of the time frame, so we'll do something for next week, send out.
But you had more
Spring,
questions.
I had more
Yeah,
questions.
Brian, finish.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm trying to get a timeline.
I was just gonna say in general, like, we all appreciate the goals of this and we're all in favor of the goals. But one thing is that, let's be honest, we're talking about increasing, density is one thing, but that's somewhat abstract. What we're talking about increasing, what's going to impact us is the height of our buildings, is the amount of air and sunlight that we get in this neighborhood. And so everything we do, we always have to look at as a community through the lens of how we live in the actual neighborhood. And that goes to the types of proposals that are being added here today. I'm deeply concerned about the single unit dwelling buildings and the shared buildings and what that means with respect to conversions, particularly in the Midtown South mixed use area, that area that we've been discussing. Because everyone's been scratching their heads going, how do we convert these buildings? Well, there's like a bit of a roadmap there, and it's troubling because it's not an area that could handle that density. There's been no discussion in this in terms of, I think, Laura's brought a fair share at one point, but fair share is also about open space and parks and resources. And that's not part of this mix. And we have a finite built environment, at least in the 30s, that we're not going to be getting more parks into and more open space. So all of a sudden, if you start building buildings where people only have a bedroom, then the sidewalks become their common space.
The density of occupation.
Yeah, and so these are like really legitimate concerns. Like, we have to think about who, I mean, a lot of people live here already. We're gonna have to live through the ramifications of the construction and development that this generates.
Okay.
And I think we have to like look at it through that lens, you know, as a community board. And I think certain things are very abstract up here. We say something's gonna be 15 feet higher. We're talking about things that are gonna be 30 feet, 40 feet higher. That is actually significant. And I don't think
4 stories.
yeah, that is a significant amount of mass that is being added to an already dense community. And what I don't see in this overall plan is the outer boroughs contending with adding additional affordability and housing. I understand that if we generate more market rate housing, I think to Jeffrey's point, we'll have a larger pool of inventory, and that might relieve some stress. But again, I don't want to say burden, but the responsibility of generating more affordable housing is being placed on our community, which already has been at the forefront of generating affordable housing. So it's just a comment, it's not a question, but you know, I think that there's a lot of stuff in there that isn't quite palatable yet. That's what I would just say.
And we're number 2 community board, you've been to so far.
Some of us. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot.
Others on the team,
Yeah.
yeah.
If I may add,
Yeah.
if I may add to these comments, yeah, at one point, I know, when the funds are available for these developments, and the environment, it'll trigger environmental impacts, statement before, no?
No, once this thing gets
So,
done and mapped in text, that
so my
becomes,
question is,
no more study.
like you had mentioned, there is no mention of the increase in population of families, is gonna be requiring more schools, more services, more sewage, electricity,
all that happened as part of the DIS for this proposal. That's a broad thing,
There's just one other thing that I wanted to add was, the presentation clearly says affordable housing and supportive housing. Understanding is that those are 2 distinctly different things. And that my concern is that, you know, without these guidelines of fair share, there will be certain areas that become very easy to say, oh, let's put more supportive housing here, which isn't necessarily from the perspective of the health of the clients in that housing and the health of the general neighborhood around there. And I don't have to tell you which neighborhood that is in particular.
it's opportunistic as opposed to being planned.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, I don't see that being addressed, and I think those 2 words should be uncoupled because they serve different populations differently.
Yeah, I mean, understand that those are 2 different things, but when it comes to the UAP framework, that additional FAR could be used for either standard affordable housing or affordable housing that's supportive.
Or for seniors.
Or for seniors, or, you know.
Usually all have different.
Yeah, Paul, we'll get to the last words.
I kind of want to go back to the special purpose districts again, because I'm trying to think of a solution to this, and we're talking about universality across the city. How many special purpose districts are there? 20?
There's like 6.
60?
Yeah.
But you know, like,
But they have a name, they're special purpose, that's why they were set up, but they're not universal.
yeah, but so maybe there is a way that there's language that can apply to all the special purpose districts that put some caveats into place. Many
Some
of
are
them-
wetlands.
Some of them, yeah, some of them are wetland. I mean, there's a difference between the special district of Hudson Yards versus the special district of Clinton. And even here within our own district, we would support a lot of these factors in the Hudson Yards special district, where we wouldn't support them in the special Clinton district. So maybe there's a way that we can still be universal in our approach, but like we're carving out historic districts in a sense, that they have to go to LPC to get their approvals. Maybe there's a way we can carve out special districts in a particular way and create some new boundaries around them. So we have some additional steps to protect ourselves.
Just to speak further to the sort of thing that Paul was speaking about, within the special purpose districts, there are residence districts and there are parts of them that are not residence districts. And I, from what I gather, it is vitally important to preserve the existing units in those residence districts because they are the most naturally occurring market rate housing. I do see value in, like personally, in creating additional affordability, you know, through a very incremental upzoning is what I would describe this as. But I don't really think that anyone here agrees with that, unfortunately. So I do see that maybe a compromise could involve protecting the residential components of these special districts and figuring out ways, maybe it's just the mid-blocks and not the avenues. It's not clear what that ultimately is, but there are probably ways to preserve buildings and prevent displacement, which is the key concern that I am gathering from the special Clinton district and then, special nurse district, Hell's Kitchen sub-district.
Right.
Like, that is sort of the solve. It's not about, there are manufacturing parts of the special Clinton district that I think that there are fewer issues with seeing those additions, that extra 20%. So maybe that's part of the compromise. I don't know what that ultimately looks like, but that might be a way to, think about how you protect those sort of residential tenement blocks that people seem.
Right. Our board has asked consistently to residentially rezone the west side of 11th Avenue in the special zoning district. It's currently an FAR 5, right? Well, cripes, we talked about rezoning that for a long time, right? It's an M zone. So I say, in the spirit of, we continually want production, but I don't think universality
Makes sense.
in a special zoning district is necessarily the only way to go. Figure out where in these bundle of districts we can find places to land more residential FAR and therefore produce more affordable residential FAR.
Both Katie and Paul had great suggestions, which does not have you lose face in trying to create a universality.
Favorite word of the day.
So if you think about it, thinking about if there already exists a special district, that there is either you are having that go through a review, or you're finding somewhere else in the district where it may be appropriate because you're carving out areas to create still the continuity of how that community at this moment lives. It's not fossilized, but what it is it's a community. It's a community. It's not holding something in place.
It's not abstract housing, it's community.
It's actually a community. And when you change the type of buildings and you actually change the type of units, you change a community. And what you're trying to do in this universal approach all at once can have an impact to, in an instant, completely shift the neighborhood. That is what gentrification is like. I don't say that's going to be your outcome because it's certainly not your goal, but that is what we also see in neighborhoods that are gentrified. It's a change that happens very quickly by making a few big changes to allow for what you're looking to do is to create ease of being able to develop. I don't think developers have had much of a problem developing in this area.
And we're trying to make sure that if they're developing, they have an option to get a little bit bigger.
Yes.
With permanently affordable.
It's really not, I
That's-
think we're now done. Frank, I think we're still in agreement. It's where it lands.
Yeah,
That
I
may be
believe
true,
this
but I
is
think
called
a
a
lot-
violent agreement. I believe we are in violent.
JD and then we'll
I am not in agreement. So we talk incremental. This is an incremental change this year. What happens 2 years from now? Where does it stop? I don't know. But that is a question I would like to ask, except to Jeffrey, because I'm sure he doesn't care about incremental changes. The more, the better, I guess. My second question is, you are city planning. And all you're talking about is increasing housing, affordable. What about the social aspects? Doris touched on them. The change in the neighborhood, the aesthetics. I'm sorry, aesthetics are important to most people that live in a special district or in Chelsea, maybe not all. Where does that come into play? If I were to channel Betty McIntosh, I would say, show me some graphics here of what it could look like, what it could look like. And take that out to people and say, this is what we're proposing.
Because what you have is,
Joe, I'm not. So that's one question. The other question is how many, do you have any idea of how many units affordable you would potentially produce in the special district?
No, we don't have that sort of fine grained analysis.
Right, of course not.
but not many.
Curious.
Katie figured out was great.
Yeah, I'm curious. So how does that measure up against the change to the neighborhood? As Dolores points out, you're changing a neighborhood, a community, one of the most intact, one of the last intact immigrant communities in the city. We tried to get a historic designation. We haven't managed yet, but it is aesthetically very critically important neighborhood in the city. That would change. Is that a consideration or does that not count at all in city planning? Just a question. Because it does with most people that live in the special district. So where does that come into play?
I think sort of to Frank's earlier point, we as a department, we plan at different scales.
Right.
Sometimes we look at the individual lot, or we can take sort of more fine grained approach. Sometimes we plan for an entire neighborhood like MSMX, where we're looking at the public realm and making improvements to the streetscape and improving parks and things like that. But sometimes we also plan at the scale of the city, and that necessarily means taking, looking at one variable and maybe prioritizing that above others.
And
Like for this
again, the
housing
consequence.
production
Right.
is the main goal of this particular
That's right.
proposal.
Yeah, and I think that is extraordinary. We don't do this, like, it's not like there are other versions of text amendments like this, like your description of like every 2 years, like there is no other version. And I think it's coming because there's a recognition on the city's part, and I think others too, that right now, given the rental market, given the amount of the homeless population in the city, that we have to address this on a citywide scale. That is where it's coming.
But the
We
housing,
can debate it, but that's where it's coming.
but transforming a city in the name of affordable housing, the worthy social goal, it's not the only social goal.
Right.
And I have practiced it for a very long time, and I've learned to balance it against other social goals. It goes back to Roberta's question about the feel of it. So we may have a 66-foot height limit, but many buildings are 50 feet. Or on the avenue, they're 60 feet, going up to now 10 stories. The change will
That wouldn't be 20%, that would be bigger than 20%.
Right, no, there's a height limit change also here. It's not just 20%, there's a specific height limit change. So that height limit change creates things that are higher than we've ever seen on 9th Avenue or 10th Avenue. That has a consequence. I'm not saying that we can't figure it out, but it has a consequence, and how development proceeds is about perception. And if you have a couple of these, then they get done together and they keep on proceeding. And Travis's point about gentrification, that is exactly how it proceeds. So I just say that this is the kind of, I'm sorry, we dragged you down a nuanced hole of local needs, but that is our role.
That's right, exactly. And look, that's why we're here.
Well, I just, in terms of process for the board members, so we're talking a lot about products, especially this series, we talk about protections on our 11, our 12 businesses.
Or management.
and more of that. But I think that we need to be prepared as a board to start hearing from the people in Chelsea that don't live in a special district, that live in these low-rise townhouses on blocks that have zero protections of a special district or a historic district. And they are going to hear that there could be a potential 20% growth rate with affordability on their blocks. And we need to be prepared to how we're going to address that as a board. So that's a whole nother set of conversations.
Because those FARs on some of those buildings are even smaller than the built allowance. So when you put the new one on top,
on there, those blocks in Chelsea.
from 6 FAR to 7.2,
Dramatically impacted
you
by
will
this.
really make a change.
And we may have tools to.
Figure
carve
out
out
for it.
in historic districts and places, like Oldie, those blocks in Chelsea.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'd like to also, I don't know if we have this analysis, what could happen at Pensall? That campus,
Of course.
I think it's overbuilt and the heights are too high to be impacted by this, but I haven't dug in deep enough.
No, it's underbuilt.
Um,
There's FAR left on that campus, 100%.
Yeah, so what would happen to the Pensall campus under these new campus regulations would be helpful if you could give us a closer analysis of that.
It's a co-op, right?
It's a private co-op.
Yeah.
But
If the co-op board decided that they wanted to build infill housing and they met all the requirements, like there's a distance between buildings, they could do it.
It's happening
And they
right,
just did it on 20.
they're literally doing it on 26th Street.
Right, but the difference is
And it's
the,
at that.
It's under-
huh?
Isn't it underbuilt relative to?
Penn South is underbuilt relative to the zoning, it's an R8. And it, without question, could have infill, and some of the regulations about allowing less building distance would allow things that may not have been possible before to be done.
I just want to acknowledge that co-chair Maria Ortiz is here.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I'm right. But Betty's gonna want graphics for Pensall.
And there is an old convent, like my understanding. is
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks.
Some religious buildings that were carved out from the
Yes.
condemnation for Penn South that are no longer in use, and those are prime candidates.
For conversion or campus.
But they're kind of on the camp.
Yeah. I think
They may be
this is
under,
fine.
I don't know the specific, I know the buildings, but I don't know the specifics of them, like,
If they're surrounded, it's around the campus.
no, they have.
It's the
it's
same
the
lot,
same
zone.
Same
So
zone.
they may just follow normal zoning rules.
I know you could. How many more, can you ask any more questions that we might want to offer? Anything, do you have more things to ask us? Because we certainly offered you a few things tonight.
I mean, I have an answer, there may be more answers. I mean, I think like, there's a lot here, totally acknowledge that. There's a lot of materials here, so you may have, there's stuff in the
We're gonna
presentation.
have questions.
Yeah, we
We're gonna
look forward to
have
seeing them,
questions.
want to try to be able to answer them. I think it's helpful for y'all to think about, so you raised a couple good points about the affordability and like how to think about that, in neighborhood, I'll say special districts or in the neighborhood as a whole. You should think about that more and think about what that means and what that means for, what that would mean for you all, like where is that?
Just a reflection, is our response what you expected more or less? Because I mean, you had to come up with expectations, we're not gonna be quiet, little shy.
Sorry, say that again.
The reception is, did you expect this response?
Oh, I thought it was gonna be way worse.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I would say.
Oh, but Andy, you're misspending the fact that there's two more committees on the board with very different people to take it up in very specific neighborhoods, so you come back for those meetings too.
This is my job.
No, so therefore, we gave you a more measured response than you expected. So therefore, when we come after you with questions, we're gonna hopefully get a measured response too.
Yeah, we have time to give them.
Yeah, I one of the things I would say is like, you're not many, even in the community board meetings that we've had so far, like people have lots of questions, people have concerns, like that's obviously like, that's not unique to you all. And one of the things, I said something before, like, it sounds like a good idea. The reason, or that could be an interesting idea. The reason I said that is we're gonna hear 1,000 things from like 59 boards. Thousands of numbers. Yeah, we're gonna hear a lot of stuff. And so that we may hear even better ideas that might come up because people have a couple more. So I think it is helpful to have as much thought and questions and consideration as we go and as.
It would be helpful to our community to have an understanding of that chart. 100 feet in, it's kind of complicated to explain.
Yeah, be a simple,
So
and more chart version.
to let people know what would happen if this happens.
And I mean, no, just to follow up on Jamie's point, I do think that the representation that there is very little change that will happen to the special districts is the message that's coming out. That's what I'm hearing from folks like our local electeds, so like, but there's very little change. And I think that that's misrepresenting what you will end up having if this goes through. And that is very concerning, because to think of it, oh, it's only 20%, it's only a little bit. Again, some of the points that Brian brought up are things that if it's abstract, you don't think about it. But then once the city is under a massive amount of construction, the reduction of air and light, you're now maybe much smaller units, a much more transient population, less families, no working families, like our teachers, our EMTs, our firefighters that can afford to live. It's gonna change drastically what all of these communities are like.
And I'll just say, we appreciate hearing your concerns and your very specific feedback. Honestly, it really does help that MCB4 definitely has a reputation for that, that's helpful, and we should refine proposals based off of that. And I think just to take it back to where we started at the beginning, we appreciate your help in helping us figure out how do we get a citywide approach to this housing affordability crisis. And, you're part of that helps make it actually work on the ground, not just in the 1,000-foot where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would just say that, I think it's really important to all of us, that as we've all said, we all agree on the goal. It really will get more support from our community if we're not getting rid of the middle income, stuff like that. That would be hard for us to swallow or deal with. And it really matters to us that there are units big enough for families.
Yeah, it's family.
And so if we can just sort of think about those, I think that would be super helpful.
Question, if we don't get an agreement throughout the city, what happens?
Sorry, what?
If the city doesn't pass it, what happens?
No, if all communities don't agree to this, what happens?
Yeah, the city planning commission and the city council have to think about that.
So they'd be exempt, maybe?
Oh, there's gonna be things.
This will probably not be what's happening.
Yeah, we're gonna disagree.
Yeah.
No, we said, no, let me rephrase. Listen, in the politics of this, I have heard 10 times over, this was done last, because this is the most difficult, controversial proposal.
And the
right?
biggest.
I'm not making, and the biggest, right? Sure. There will be many city council members, as their various communities, not just community boards, get activated on this, will not like certain things. There's gonna be some parts of Queens that do not want accessory dwelling units, okay, even though it makes sense, okay, so. But I'm not gonna live there, so what can I say? But folks like us, who are very specific.
And that's why you should write in your recommendation that you support accessory.
Well, I would say that's gonna be very hard unless you give us things that you support us making changes in return. That's how that works usually. So
And
I wanna
also
say,
fair for us to speak to another community's lived
yeah.
experience.
I'm very nervous about us taking, supporting things that are not, we have none of them, right? Like, our state senator is very active in ADU stuff, and I'm like, I mentioned, we don't have it in our district, so it's an issue. So for us, we definitely want to work forward on this, but we kind of need to work to see movement, because I'll tell you, this will be a community activator, right? It will not be one of those people.
In every community, we
Yeah,
can
but I
acknowledge
mean,
that,
ours-
everybody's gonna say, not our community.
Yeah, and that's not an outcome. This, like the parking alone, please fix it, there's certain things that make sense here. So.
Yeah, we can certainly support the removal of parking.
Well, we said it out of time. So,
Except
thank
that,
you.
boy, is that gonna be like a
Thank you
thing.
so much.
Joe, there's somebody from the community who has their hand raised on Zoom.
Janine, go right ahead. Yeah,
Maria and Patrick over.
Okay. Candace? Oh my God,
I've been here the whole time.
I think she
Yay,
made
Carrie.
Patrick a panelist, maybe, and allow him to speak.
Let's bring her
Just
over.
bring him over. We have a moderator.
Patrick, you can unmute.
You see?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you for having me. My topic is pretty much completely different from what you guys have been discussing for the last 2 hours. I'm representing a tenant. I am a tenant at 540 West 53rd Street. And my concerns are with
We're having, sorry to cut you off, this is Dolores Ruben. We're actually gonna take that topic up, right after this is concluded. Are you able to hang with us for a few more minutes?
I can do that. Yes, I can do it.
Thank you very much. We'll just leave you here, on the panel side. Thank you.
Okay.
So are you all coming back to us, or we submit questions and you answer us? Is that the idea?
Send us your questions. The more precise, the more specific, the better.
Okay.
We'll do our best to turn those around as soon as possible.
And then from our side, next week, we'll get the framework out. So all this committee, send it to other language folks too, comment on it. So we have something that we can bring to the full board for the June meeting. And if we have to flesh it out further, there's.
May I say one more thing? So first off, thank you to the presenters. This was like a lot. And I do want to like emphasize how important it is to think about like the sort of global pressure on rents for renters in New York City, but particularly as a younger person, it is really hard to imagine what a future here would look like. And to see policies that would encourage, you know, smaller apartments so people could even get a foothold in a neighborhood like this, that is incredibly appealing to see, you know, some very small changes that would ultimately add a little bit more housing that could potentially slow down rent growth in our community. I think it would mean a lot to myself, but other people who are like me as well. I did see from DCP, both in the environmental impact statement and then on its own data portal, our community district is just over 1,000 acres. So the estimated impact of this is a little over 1,000 units. And the impacts specifically are minimal with regard to like I guess neighborhood character change. And I encourage folks to look at the EIS and the like narrative that accompanies that, because I think it does unpack that a little bit further. And, you know, hopefully that would answer some questions. But I do want to just emphasize that conceptually, this is incredibly important. And it is also incredibly important that it pass beyond Community District 4 because of how much Community District 4 has already done and how much more we need the rest of the city to do.
That's great. That message is fantastic. It's,
Yeah.
it's 1,000 units. We could probably get that on 11,000 alone.
I know.
I think we could do that quick numbers game on it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, another, someone's coming to speak.
Yep.
I'm turning over the chair to Dolores, as Clinton Housing Village on conflict today.
Okay. Good luck in your other city.
Give them a minute to withdraw.
Take a cookie.
Yeah. I think these were a good idea.
There you go. There you go. Nothing so bad.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, we do have new business that we're going to, present. We have a few folks here, that have raised some concerns.
You have to step out, guys.
They've raised some concerns, regarding, several buildings. And so I know, Patrick, that you're here. We'd like to give you an opportunity to present your issue.
Yes, my issue, getting straight to the point, is with a leak in my daughter's bedroom that's been going on for approximately 1.5 years, maybe 2 years now. And, you know, we tried to keep a positive spin on everything. we don't mean any disrespect to anyone from the beginning. But as time goes on, the bitterness has grown because of the fact that our issues have not been addressed properly. For example,
Apologize for interrupting, Patrick, but can you tell us, what location you're talking about?
540 West 53rd Street.
Thank you.
Under Clinton Housing.
Okay.
What getting into this affordable housing thing went from a blessing to an absolute nightmare, in the sense that as we move to try to get the leak in our daughter's room fixed, among other things, but that's the biggest one, our emails, our phone calls have been unanswered repeatedly. You know, we have building managers and upper management and whatnot. We've emailed everyone, we've called everyone, and you know, so much of that goes ignored. Yet when it's time for the rent to go up, they will reply to the email, okay, the rent is going up, but no mention of, hey, here's when we're going to fix the leak or whatever, or what have you. So as time went on, we finally got some action in repairing the leak, but not until we had to go to court about it, which we did not want to do. Another one of my biggest concerns is the amount of time that I have had to take off from work, leaving work early, spending money at the post office to try to get some action taken to get when all we want is for the water to stop dripping in our daughter's room. Okay, so on top of taking time off work and spending money and losing money from not going to work and spending money trying to get this moving forward, I'm taking time off work to take my daughter to make sure she doesn't have lead poisoning and things of this nature. So, you know, it's extremely frustrating. And I hear and appreciate what you guys are trying to do and trying to accomplish, but you want to consider, once you create this housing, how are you gonna keep this from happening to other people? Now, I may be the only person from this building or under the Clinton Housing Development umbrella, so to speak, that's in this meeting right now, but believe me, there are more people who are confused and went from patient to happy to completely bitter and upset, and a little bit humiliated by the way that we have been ignored. So my question is, if you were me, what would you do next?
Well, Patrick, what I wanted to ask is are you looking for us to provide some support in getting some of these issues resolved? Are you looking broadly for the community to be commenting specifically on your situation? How can we help you here?
Well, I just want the water to stop dripping in my daughter's bedroom. That's really what I want. But after living here for so long and talking to other tenants, I cannot not mention the fact that they should be heard as well.
I understand. Thank you. What we'll do is we'll coordinate with our district manager on several resources that we could use in order to figure out how we can help figure out the specific issue and what the holdup is.
Okay. So may I ask one more question of you, since you're addressing? What would you do if you were me?
For me personally, I would look to go to housing court. That's me, because there is a actual mechanism for resolving issues, which I've had to do in my own living situation as well.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear you've had to do that, but thank you for your feedback. And that's exactly what I've done. And come June 1st, if it's still leaking, I'm going to have to take time, which I don't want to do, and go back to court again, file new paperwork, and go through the whole process again.
So Patrick, if you could, I'm going to direct you to the CB4 website, MCB4, nyc.gov/MCB4. There's also a shorter version. And look for Jesse Bodine, who's our district manager's email address. And we will give him a heads up that you will be connecting with him tomorrow about the problem, and we'll follow up.
Okay, and if you could repeat that web address one more time, please.
nyc.gov/MCB4.
Michael Charlie Delta 4.
Michael Charlie, board, Bravo.
Board.
I don't, military. No, I don't want to ask you for his email on live. Yeah, I was asking you for your email because we are being recorded and I don't think you want the world to know it. So thank you, Patrick.
Well, yeah, no disrespect to anybody, but all the email that I sent to Joe just bounces back to me. The management that he has in place, again, I don't know what the deal is, but I don't know if that's the best choice of management right now. I don't blame them for anything. In fact, a byproduct of this whole thing is, as the leak started and kept on going, we were left with the management or the people sitting at the desk here, the front desk here. The tenants are left to discuss, and sometimes these discussions get intense on how we're going to resolve this, and it may elevate to a bickering match between the tenant and the person who's sitting at the front desk when neither one of us have the power to really do anything. And I saw that, how ridiculous
I'm
that's
sorry,
getting.
Patrick, can I interject? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can.
This is Marie Ortiz. I am the co-chair of Housing, Health, and Human Services. I arrived very late due to a family emergency, and I am virtual right now. I heard what you said, and I'm sorry. I can only imagine how frustrating it must be for you. What I would say, you asked a very good question. What would you do if you were me? And if I personally were you, I would do exactly what you're doing, which is you've taken the steps necessary to address it, which includes coming to the community board, right? And so I would have suggested what Dolores actually had said. Thank you, Dolores, for taking over in my seat for me tonight, which is to reach out to Jesse Bodine and facilitate having a meeting with CHDC. That's what I would suggest for you to do. Okay. And I just wanted to interject and cut you off because the time is 9:45. We usually wrap up this meeting much earlier.
Okay, I think there is one other tenant in this meeting, Shira, that would like to speak also.
Dolores, I'll let you handle the rest.
Actually, I don't see any other attendees. There's Juan Carlos.
Okay, so just so you know, again, we mean no disrespect. This is just going on too long, and all we want is for the water to stop dripping in her room. That's all we want. That's all we want.
Understood, and that's coming to the public process is part of what is necessary to help facilitate some resolution here. I think we did bring over Juan Carlos.
Yeah, hi, this is his wife, Shira.
Oh, hi, Shira. Sorry about that.
Hi. So we also live in the same building as Patrick, and I just want to echo some of his sentiments. I think it was really helpful to hear that there is somebody who we can go to who may be able to directly address concerns. We also have had repairs in our apartment that have gone unanswered and unmet, and are continuing to struggle with that. Additionally, the building has some pretty significant security concerns. The door of the building is regularly broken and it's very hard to get updates on when it will be fixed. As a result, there are people who have trespassed into the building. It has sort of become a regular occurrence for tenants to be bringing up that there were, overnight guests in the building, in the stairwells. And these pieces are obviously concerning. We feel so, so, so grateful to be in this housing situation in so many ways. It has changed our experience being able to raise 2 children in this city. At the same time, you know, we want a safe and secure place to raise our children, where we can also have, you know, our basic needs as tenants met. Our stove isn't working, you know, just come and repair it. Those types of pieces, just would be beneficial. And so I think maybe sitting down and meeting with someone who can help us sort of navigate this process outside of 311 or, you know, whatever those mechanisms are would be, I think, helpful to a lot of tenants here who have, who are just sort of feeling at one point so happy to be living here, and at the other point, you know, need some of these things addressed and aren't sure how to do it.
Thank you. We
Yes.
appreciate that. As Maria said, please reach out to Jessica Bodine and facilitate a conversation, and we'll see if we can get to a resolution. Thank you both for joining us this evening.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
That's a phrase.
Thanks.
Please say aye. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
At the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Maria, I think we lost you. Meeting adjourned.